Death came to the royal family of the Snow Country like a thief in the night, 'cause their blood's mixed with the spirit of water. When sorrow fills their hearts, the sky gets covered in clouds and it starts raining, even if there ain't a cloud in the sky. That day was the emperor's first wife's funeral, but the sun was shining bright. The dead woman's son was holding it together that day, trying not to mess with the weather. This dude was keeping his feelings bottled up, but he wasn't always so emotional. But at one point, Princess Sheena noticed his face looking real dark. And the next thing you know, it started raining and people were pulling out their umbrellas, which had to be put on hold because Sheena suddenly took a turn for the worse and her legs gave out. Some people were yelling for a stretcher, and others were screaming for a doctor. Sheena just scanned the soaked, dark clothes of the people around her, her gaze landing on her brother. She saw a furious rage burning in his eyes, and in that instant, it hit her. This whole world was part of a novel. The Snowdon Empire is ruled by Emperor Deegan Royce Arthur Whitesnow. His first wife was Princess Gione of the Rain Kingdom, and they had a son, Aiden Heinrich Whitesnow. But the emperor paid no attention to his wife or his own flesh and blood, and then a common noblewoman named Melissa captured his heart. Completely smitten, Deegan decided she was the one who would truly be his empress. Then Nishana Erin Whitesnow was born, a product of their love. She had hair as black as night, smooth white skin, and eyes as blue as the sky. Once they came of age, they could make a contract with a water spirit. Everyone kept saying this girl was destined for an amazing future, but it all went to hell when people started listening to the rebels. Backed by his mother's homeland, the prince brutally murdered the emperor and his cronies. They spared the princess's life, but banished her to the most god-forsaken place they could find. In exile, she secretly healed people, planning to live out her days like that. But her reputation as a saint and her powers just kept growing. The prince saw her as a threat and ordered his loyal knight, Rubus Russell, to take her out. When Ruby showed up at the princess's door, she knew right away why he was there. She realized her half-brother had finally given the order to get rid of her for good. The girl was powerless. Dropping to her knees, she knew it was all over. As a final act, the knight granted her the right to speak her last words. He would relay those words to His Highness, and Sheena didn't hesitate. She only wished that Aiden would become a sun, shining even in the Empire's farthest reaches. And so the beloved princess died. Only the prince remained, taking his place on the bloodied throne. He possessed the will of a powerful emperor, but he'd lost all human feeling. And just when it seemed like everything was finished, a girl appeared who would change his life forever. Princess Sheena, who thought of herself as Snow White, spent her last moments thinking about her brother. But then she returned from oblivion, and opening her eyes, she found herself in a room. Joey, the maid, was fussing over her, totally freaked out. She said the lady had fainted and they brought her back to her room and the doctor's on his way. The princess sat up in bed, thinking she'd just had a seriously messed up dream. But worried it might be real, she realized her time was running out. The thought of dying soon sent shivers down her spine. She wasn't ready to kick the bucket. Plus, her parents were facing a nasty end at the hands of her brother. Not wanting that kind of messed up future, Sheena decided to do everything she could to stop it. In the novel, Nishana didn't have any regrets or hard feelings. She just accepted her tragic fate. But now, the princess remembered that Aiden was going to off her in the future, because just by being alive, she caused him a ton of pain. Her happiness became the reason for his loneliness, but she didn't even notice back then. But all those moments of her rise to the top slowly twisted into pure hatred. And that stepsister stayed Aiden's enemy right up until the bitter end. The girl couldn't stand the thought of that horrible future coming true. So she decided right then and there to make damn sure everyone ended up alive and happy. Her train of thought got cut off by the maid yelling at her for getting out of bed. Joey was begging her not to start drawing yet, 'cause His Majesty would be arriving any minute. So the princess figured, all right, she'd climb back into bed. But first, she had to ask how His Majesty's funeral went. Turns out the Emperor ordered the whole thing wrapped up the second Sheena fainted, because she's considered the Empire's greatest treasure, more important than any funeral. So she shouldn't worry, and instead focus on getting some serious rest. But then the princess realized the tragic plot's already kicked off. And now she's gonna bite the dust even sooner than she did in the novel. Realizing that drained the color from her already pale face, making her look sickly. No matter how much she racked her brain, only 3 things came to mind. First, she needs to get the Emperor to name her half-brother as his successor. She also needs to somehow dial down his hatred for her, and those will be the first steps to changing the future. But if those 2 things were even possible, Sheena wouldn't have had to meet her end in the first place. And even if she says she doesn't want the throne, there's no guarantee Aiden will buy it. Picking the heir is the king's call, and as a dad, he's pretty chill and kind. But when the fate of the whole damn kingdom's on the line, he's a different animal. So to sway the emperor, we gotta shift the support for the princess over to the prince. Getting close to her brother's a no-go though, not after she crashed his mom's funeral. As soon as Sheena remembers his face that day, her courage just vanishes. That leaves one last play, the knight, Rubus Russell. This girl's gotta figure out how to stop this guy from offing her and get him to let her go. And she's gotta play it smart, so the prince doesn't send another knight after her. This princess is in a tight spot, and finding a way out ain't gonna be easy. At first, she thought she was Snow White, the main character of the story. I mean, she's got hair black as night, eyes blue as the ocean, and skin white as snow. But that look isn't just her thing. Her stepbrother Aiden's got it too. Whatever she does now, it's gotta be better than the future she remembers. So her plan is to get on the good side of that silver-haired knight, so he can't bring himself to off her. He's gotta be like that huntsman from Snow White, the one who took pity on her and helped her escape. And Sheena realized, to make it all work, she's gotta become Snow White herself. Breakfast time! The princess joined her family at the table, but her parents were worried Sheena didn't stay in her room to rest longer. The girl looked a little tired, but that's 'cause she's been racking her brain over her plan. Her father was way too anxious, especially since the doc diagnosed her with, issues. So she explained that she'd just been staying up late reading lately. Then she turned to her father with a request, saying she understood how busy he was with work. Of course, the emperor denied having any urgent business, wanting to give his daughter attention. But his assistant got visibly nervous, and Sheena even thought about backing down from her plan. That's when her mother spoke up, noticing she hadn't been eating well and figured she wasn't feeling great, and offered her some chicken boiled with medicinal herbs to give her strength. They served a huge chicken, and Sheena hesitated but promised to try and eat it all. Just then, it hit her that she could use this as an opportunity, and she announced her desire to train, to increase her stamina, especially since the healer recommended exercise, and Sheena decided to learn swordsmanship. That request seemed pretty weird to both her mom and dad, but the princess insisted it was exactly what she needed to get stronger. Truth is, it was all part of her scheme to get closer to that knight. The emperor agreed, saying taking care of yourself is key for anyone about to inherit the throne. He immediately called for Sir Hilton, who was standing guard at the front gates, and ordered him to personally train the princess, but she suddenly protested. Though she quickly caught herself, explaining she didn't want to pull such a powerful knight away from his duties, even though he'd be an awesome teacher, especially if Sheena wanted to get into sparring. Still, the princess kept saying she wanted to learn the basics first, adding that she didn't want to distract any of the other knights from their work either. And she'll be fine with a knight in training like Ruby's. He got into the palace at 17, just a year after starting, thanks to his skills. As a knight's apprentice, he's skilled enough to train the princess. Plus, her parents wanted her to make friends, so she can even become friends with him. The emperor still had his doubts, thinking it'd be better to get a more experienced knight. That's when Sheena gave him the puppy dog eyes, begging him to agree to her request. So Dagon agreed, but on one condition. If there's no progress in a month, Hilton will become Sheena's teacher. The girl eagerly agreed, thrilled with her first success in her survival plan. And she planned to head to the training grounds with Hilton later, bringing snacks. A little later, Sheena packed a small basket and, with a knight escorting her, headed to the training grounds. She was a little worried, thinking maybe she should have brought a pie instead of cookies. But Hilton swore he'd eat anything the princess made, even flour. Sheena told him not to tease her. She was trying to make a good impression on her future teacher. She got annoyed when Hilton suggested winning someone over with flour of all things. But she figured he just didn't understand how serious this whole thing was. Suddenly, the girl stopped dead, nearly taking out her escort. Prince Aiden appeared in front of them, and the knight gave him a polite greeting. A chill ran down the princess's spine, because standing there was the guy who ordered her execution. He was coming from training and looked tired, even if he was still scowling. She doesn't remember Aiden being kind, but he's still her only brother. It even made her feel a little bad seeing him like this. He looked like he wasn't eating right, even though he usually has a good appetite. Aiden barely even acknowledged his sister, just walked right past her. She still thought his behavior was a little weird. So she turned around, gently tugged on his sleeve, and spoke to him. The prince gave her a sideways glance, barely turning, and grumbled, asking what she wanted. His look was so sharp it made Sheena involuntarily flinch. A lump stuck in her throat, and she couldn't say a word. Aiden asked her the same question again, but this time even more annoyed. At first, the princess could only get out these shaky, hesitant sounds. Then she mumbled something about the Empress's coronation. It was totally beside the point. She just blurted out the first thing that popped into her head. Sheena just wanted to apologize for her mom taking Aiden's mom's place, you know? But as she was working up the nerve, the prince just snatched his sleeve out of her hand and took off again, leaving Sheena standing there frozen, just staring after him. Hilton was worried about her, so he asked her what was wrong. The princess was torn up because her brother just took her attempts to comfort him as an insult. Sheena took a deep breath, then told him she was fine now. And forcing a smile, she suggested they head on to the training grounds. She spun around real quick like she couldn't even stand to look at her brother, who just kept on walking like nothing happened. The princess, with her knight by her side, was doing her best to just forget the whole awkward thing. The knights basically lived in packs on the training grounds, totally focused on getting better. A lot of them were nobles, but they were all about that brotherhood vibe. Once they got there, Hilton noticed the princess was scanning the area. He offered to help her find whoever she was looking for, especially since he was her mentor and knew the place inside and out. But before he could even finish, Sheena spotted who she was after. Rubus Russell was going hard at it, practicing his sword moves with a dummy, totally lost in his own world. But then he caught something out of the corner of his eye. Looks like they got company. Not just anyone, but a princess, and she's staring right at him. Rubus turned away without a word, figuring the princess was here on other business. She was speechless again, but this time it was because she was stunned by how hot this guy was. He's got this blinding silver hair, and those red eyes are just burning right through it. While she was busy admiring him, Rubis went back to training, and something clicked in Sheena's head. They say, according to legend, that red eyes belong to the devil himself. Who knows if that superstition's true, but everyone believed it, and that's how the Earl of Russell's second son was born. His mother was a maid, and she died right after a difficult birth. Then the rumors started that Rubis devoured his own mother, and that's why the kid grew up all alone. That messed up time is what made the young man who he is today. Just another grunt, bowing and scraping to everyone. That's when Sheena realized she was actually starting to feel sorry for the guy. Just then, Sir Richard walked up, apologizing for being late. The princess told him not to worry about it and offered him some snacks. Pleased but a little confused, the knight announced a break for everyone training. Then, even louder, he announced that the princess had brought treats for everyone and told them to line up. Every knight got a serving of the tasty goodies. Afterwards, Richard asked the princess the reason for her visit. Sir Hilton took it upon himself to explain everything on behalf of Her Highness. And while the men were talking, Sheena's attention drifted back to Rubis. The dude was standing off by himself, holding a cupcake, and he hadn't even taken a bite, just staring at it like he was praying. But the princess figured he just didn't like it. That's why he wasn't eating it. She was hoping Rubis wouldn't toss the cookie she personally brought him on the ground. But then the guy brought the treat to his mouth and slowly took a bite, which made the princess feel a huge wave of relief, like her life depended on it. Then Richard turned to her, and she confirmed she was looking for a training mentor. But first, she wanted to hear his recommendations for the most talented cadet. The girl was praying Richard would immediately mention Rubis, who she thought was the best. But the senior knight suggested taking some guy named Henry as a teacher. He said the guy was capable and even-tempered, so there wouldn't be any issues. But the princess threw a fit, saying she needed the best because she wanted to learn how to spar. And then Richard admitted that Russell was the most skilled when it came to swordsmanship. He nodded towards the silver-haired dude, who was still just standing off to the side. Sheena pretended to like the recommendation, and getting closer to Rubis, she asked him to be her fencing instructor. Russell looked at her from under his thick bangs, like he didn't get why she was latching onto him. Then he slightly turned his face away, as if trying to say he didn't want the job. At that moment, it felt like the sky was falling on Sheena's shoulders, because this could ruin her whole plan. She could feel herself trembling inside, which she tried to hide, praying Rubis wouldn't refuse. He kept standing there silent, but now he lowered his eyes to the ground. Then the captain of the knights called him over for a quick word. The others didn't get why they picked Russell. Everyone knows he's got a dark cloud hanging over him. Rubis approached Her Highness and, bowing deeply, gave her a proper greeting. Without raising his eyes to meet hers, he introduced himself by his full name. Sheena just smiled at him, admitting she was really happy to finally meet him. Then Richard explained that the princess wanted to learn fencing, and Russell was to be her instructor. The guy started to say something again, and Sheena's heart skipped a beat with anticipation. Before he could refuse, she declared she wouldn't take up too much of his time. Rubis just looked away, while she clasped her hands together like she was praying and gave him the puppy dog eyes. After a few seconds, the kid just nodded like, "Yeah, I'm in." The princess, stoked, grabbed his hand and started thanking him like crazy. She was genuinely happy. I mean, this was the first win on the road to survival. Now she just had to buddy up with him, make him forget about offing her. Later, Sheena headed to history class, where teacher David was droning on about the Empire. He was saying how the Empire hit a golden age of peace and quiet, thanks to the spirits watching over them. Sheena was totally zoning out, like, why am I even here? Either way, she and the prince needed to soak up all the knowledge a future ruler needs. And her brother was way ahead of her in that department. But Sheena wasn't trying to compete, especially since she couldn't care less. So the teacher went on about the Wind Empire, how it's falling apart. By now, half the Western territories become a wasteland. They're running out of food in the Empire, and they're eyeing Dryad, the spirit forest. That forest sits on the border, and the Wind Empire owns part of it. But that border's crawling with raiders, driven by hunger, terrorizing the locals. Still, the Empire's guards are working overtime to keep everyone safe. David rattled off a few guard families, but the Russells weren't on the list. 2 years back, Rubis almost lost his title entirely if he hadn't stepped up, and on the battlefield, at 13 years old, he earned himself a nickname. For his relentless fighting in the Snowlands, they called him the Winter Demon. That's when the teacher remembered the rumor about this kid becoming the princess's fencing instructor. And, bummed out, he figured Rubis probably couldn't teach Her Highness squat. After class, the princess went out for some fresh air and found a nice, quiet spot under a tree. A dragonfly landed on the grass nearby, catching Sheena's eye. The princess was actually thinking about that wild story where Russell bites the dust. It says his body just vanishes like poof, gone without a trace. Like Rubis didn't want anyone to remember him dying, and it seems he was always ready for it. While the princess was lost in thought, he showed up and apologized for being late. The guy stood in front of Sheena with his head down like a guilty kid. But she understood why he acted that way and why he tried to avoid looking people in the eye. She insisted everything was fine, that she'd just arrived early, and with a small smile she told him not to apologize. Though she realized again, she felt more and more sympathy for him. Who would have thought the Winter Demon and the kid who always looks down are the same guy? But right now, the princess was focused on becoming his friend. Knowing Rubis wouldn't start the conversation, Sheena decided to take the lead. Small talk about the weather seemed safe, but she shifted to the topic of lessons, reminding him she wanted to learn swordsmanship to build up her endurance, and Rubis explained she needed to get in shape first, starting with light exercises. Sheena figured she'd have to run a few laps with a light load first, and she even thought that the reason, even if it was just wanting to be friends with Russell. But at this rate, she'd become as strong as the best knight around. She figured that was all for the best, since it'd give her a better chance of surviving. But the guy wasn't in any hurry to explain how the first lesson would start. And the princess was already stoked, looking forward to getting stronger. Just like she thought, first up was running around the training grounds. Further training would depend on how much stamina the princess had. Also, Rubis asked Her Highness to call him by his name, not Sir Russell. The girl argued against it since he was her teacher, and she couldn't just use his first name. And then she actually asked him to look at her when she was talking, adding that his eyes were so beautiful, like a camellia flower in the snow. Sheena confessed that when they first met, she was so captivated by his looks that she couldn't even string 2 words together. Rubis just got embarrassed and blushed down to his ears, turning his face away again, and to get out of the awkwardness, he decided to show her how to do it right, leading by example. Russell started jogging, and Sheena, looking at his red ears, just knew that the color red suited him. However, after a short workout, Sheena felt like she was about to kick the bucket. Even though she only ran 2 laps, she could barely walk even the next day. If she had run all 10 like she was supposed to, she definitely would have croaked. Now she's in class, where the philosophy teacher Carlos, with a displeased look, thanked her for arriving just in the nick of time. She just said she's entitled to a break and being a little late, but seeing the teacher was about to blow a gasket, she said she was just kidding. Today we're diving into monarchism, picking up where we left off last time. Carlos was laying out what a monarch needs to be to hold on to power. Sheena pretended to listen since she wasn't planning on following the heir's path. All she said was that a monarch should be benevolent, to which the teacher explained that you just have to look that way. Because a monarch doesn't need mercy or justice, they need calculation and the ability to analyze. Still, Carlos pointed out that Her Highness thinks like a monarch, which she doubted herself, realizing she doesn't really fit the mold. Carlos taught her not to give in to sympathy and not to forgive so easily. But once Sheena understands someone, she just can't help but forgive them. She can't hate Aiden, and she can't help but feel for Rubies either, because in the novel, she saw what he had to go through. And the more she heard about the qualities of a monarch, the more she realized she wasn't cut out for the job. Later, the princess got ready for training again, even though Hilton was begging her to rest. Seeing her walk now, worse than a newborn fawn trying to stand. Sheena's legs were giving out, but she was still determined to go to training. She just didn't want to waste time resting, so she could get stronger faster. Russell was already waiting for her on the training grounds, ready for the next lesson. I almost choked when I saw the princess practically crawling towards me. She just brushed off being late, saying another class ran long. They started talking and Rubis actually made eye contact today. The princess was digging it. She was happy he'd listened to her. She vowed to try harder too, then started asking about the workout. Rubis was gonna make her do 2 laps again, but seeing how she looked, he stuck with 1. He also told her to speak up if she couldn't keep up with him. His words sounded like he genuinely cared, so she decided to give it her all. But the second she took a step, her shoe went flying off her foot. And then Rubis heard something smack the ground real loud behind him. I turned around and saw Her Highness sprawled out on the grass. The guy rushed over to her, worried she might be hurt. The shoe was fine, just her pride took a hit, which made her feel embarrassed. Still, Rubis took the blame again, checking out the princess's leg. He just didn't explain right away that she needed to wear more practical shoes for training. Then he leaned in a little and apologized for being so rough. She only realized what was happening when he scooped her up to carry her inside. The princess definitely appreciated the attention, but she was so flustered her face turned beet red. She tried to get back on her feet, but Rubis told her to hold still so she wouldn't fall. His face was so close to hers that she just wanted the ground to swallow her up. But she couldn't walk on her own, so she agreed to let Russell carry her back to the palace. All the while, she was racking her brain, trying to figure out how to make up for this awkward situation. And then it hit her. She remembered she'd brought a snack in her bag. Pulling out a cookie, she offered Sir Russell a bite. The guy gave the sweet treat a slightly suspicious look. That's when it dawned on the princess that both his hands were full. Deciding to help her rescue her out, Sheena just shoved the cookie right into his mouth herself. But the next second, she was seized by panic, realizing she'd crossed a line. They finally made it back to the castle, where Joey immediately checked her over. Even though the princess insisted she wasn't hurt that badly, the maid wasn't buying it. And she reamed out Hilton, saying he wasn't watching close enough, and the princess went way overboard. Shin even felt bad for Hilton, 'cause he really did try to stop her. But right now, she's more stoked that she and Rubis bonded, and he even took her bribe of a cookie. What's more, the princess got a glimpse of his softer side. Shin smiled without even realizing it, which made Joey give her a suspicious look, figuring she didn't just hurt her foot, but maybe bumped her head too. Then the maid decided the accident happened because of uncomfortable shoes, and promised to arrange for the princess to get special training shoes made. But until the wound heals, there's no way she's doing any training. Shin immediately freaked out, yelling that she has to train every day. What scared her even more was that her plan to get closer to Rubis was about to fall apart again. She glanced at Hilton, hoping he'd back her up, but the traitor was keeping his mouth shut. And then the maid loomed over her, practically ordering her to rest. That's when Sheena figured even if she couldn't train, she could just go see Rubis to thank him. But they banned her from leaving the palace for a week until her leg was fully healed. Today, the princess can finally go train and thank Rubis. Right now, Sheena was having lunch with her mom, who noticed how tired her daughter looked. Melissa wasn't told her daughter got hurt training, so she wouldn't forbid her from going. So Her Highness distracted her mother by chatting about how much she enjoyed having tea with her. The girl also complimented the desserts they served. Melissa baked those cupcakes special after she heard her daughter was into baking. Sheena gratefully tried one with a strawberry on top, and she was blown away by how light and airy it was, like a cloud. The frosting was so sweet it just melted in your mouth. This dessert was so good, the princess wanted to let Russell try it. Seeing how much her daughter liked them, Melissa offered her some to take with her, which really made Her Highness happy because it would make a great little incentive. And at the next tea party, Melissa decided to make this dessert the main attraction. It's gonna be the event to kick off the social season. Sheena figured it was another chance to meet with her supporters. It's too early to recruit them to Aiden's side, but we can identify potential allies. That's why Sheena asked Mom for permission to attend that tea party too. Melissa didn't even understand why she was asking. She was just happy about it. After all, it's been her longtime dream to have tea with her daughter. The girl even felt ashamed, because her intention to be at the tea party stemmed from a completely different reason. But this has to be the start of a happy ending for her and Mom. Sheena laid the groundwork to convince Dad. Now all that's left is improving her relationship with her brother. However, that scared her the most, and she kept sighing heavily on her way to training, which worried the maid, who thought her leg was hurting again. And the princess explained that wasn't the reason for her concern. It's just that she doesn't know how to handle someone who hates her guts. And Joey suggested the princess show off her good qualities, like how other people's pain matters more to her than her own. That could help someone who doesn't tell anyone about what he's going through. Even if you understand that person, it won't magically make their pain disappear. But there's one upside to all this: he won't feel so alone. Sheena was worried, but her maid's sure she can pull it off. Then Joey handed her a basket and told her to be careful, so nothing like last time happens. The princess was grateful for her maid's care and good advice. Now she's got the confidence to save her brother from his endless loneliness. My knees went weak again when I saw Aiden standing by the entrance. The princess never expected to run into him so soon. Thinking he was headed to training too, she suggested they walk together. The prince just grimaced and headed the other way, not wanting anything to do with his sister. But Sheena stopped him, grabbing his arm and asking if they could talk for a minute. Aiden yanked his arm away and snapped, telling her to keep her hands to herself. This was the exact scene Sheena had read about in the original story. In the book, the princess never spoke to her brother again after this. And now, being in her shoes, the girl understood that Nishina had avoided him out of fear that he'd hurt her again. Besides, Her Highness didn't want to hurt him either. But instead of just accepting this tragedy and not making things worse, it's way better to push for a happy ending. Sheena totally got that, but another problem was about to hit her hard. At practice, Rubis made her run a lap around the field again. By the end, her legs were killing her so bad, she couldn't even stand still. Seeing her drop to all fours, Russell rushed over to her again, looking worried. She straight up told him she was completely beat, like she couldn't feel anything anymore. The princess asked to skip practice today, which you could totally see just by looking at her face. They headed to the lawn under a tree, where Sheena laid out all the goodies she'd brought. She was hyping up all the cupcakes, begging them to try them ASAP. Rubis, just like last time, was checking out the treats real close first. But not for long, he popped a little pastry into his mouth. Judging by his face, the princess could tell he was digging it. She wasn't eating any herself. She'd already had her fill and didn't want more. She brought all this just for Russell and told him to enjoy the food. While he ate, Sheena watched him chew, like she was watching her favorite pet. When he'd eaten almost half, she asked how much he liked it. The guy honestly admitted he was super happy, and then Sheena asked him what exactly he liked the most. Without missing a beat, Russell pointed at the cupcake that just melted in his mouth. That's how the princess figured out he had a major sweet tooth, 'cause the original story never mentioned what this dude's into, though it's totally possible nobody ever bothered to find out. So instead of bribes, Sheena's decided to cook up some gifts for her awesome mentor. At the same time, she's hoping she can connect with her brother just as easily. Then, the butler rolled up, saying he was looking for Her Highness. She got a little wary, but he brought news that he thought would make her day. Still, the princess wasn't exactly holding her breath for something good. Turns out the emperor's ordered her to attend regular meetings, starting tomorrow. This is supposed to be another step on her path to the throne, but for the princess, it's a total drag. Later, at the meeting, the emperor was talking about the Wind Empire and how they're acting all high and mighty. They want us to hand over the entire forest in exchange for a magic stone. The Dryad Forest is sacred, man. It's the land of spirits, a place that's kept its original form. And if we give up the forest, it'll be destroyed, just like all the other forests in the Wind Empire. We can't just ignore their demands, though, 'cause they control the power of those magic stones. The ministers were advising to demand something bigger in return. Sure, we need the magic stones, but this whole thing could escalate into a full-blown war. For the princess, who was also there, the argument over territory seemed pointless. The whole vibe of selfishness, greed, and incompetence was just suffocating her. And while some were debating how much they could lose if war broke out, others were saying they were confident in the strength of their guardians, unlike some others. The more they argued, the more the tension ratcheted up. The princess was so suffocated, she just wanted to scream to make them stop. But Aiden just sat there, stone-faced. She wondered how he could stand it. Then the emperor ordered the circus to end. It was getting way too loud. And he asked the chancellor to weigh in on the situation. The chancellor stated flat out that if war broke out, the empire would suffer big time. Military spending would double, and it'd be even worse than that border skirmish 2 years ago. And if they handed over the forest, like Wind wanted, the chance of war would drop by 30%. However, war would still kick off in about 10 years. In the novel, the war started in 2 years, but back then, Snowden owned the forest. Nishina never left the homeland until her death, and she died right there in the Dryad Forest. And she still hoped that today, for sure, the forest wouldn't be handed over to Wind. But the ministers were already discussing who to put in charge, so to stop that, the princess asked to be allowed to speak. For her, it was a chance to slightly improve her brother's image in their father's eyes. Sheena declared that she was plenty old enough to fulfill the duties of a member of the imperial family. Therefore, she was ready to take on responsibility whenever it was necessary. Noticing Aiden's sideways unhappy glare, she immediately added that her brother felt the same way. The emperor became interested and asked his son to share his thoughts. Aiden also said he's ready to step up whenever he's called upon. In the novel, he was forced into war, but now people should see him differently. Sheena was hoping this would help her connect with her brother. Even a little, but the guy was sitting there with a sour look, giving her the side-eye. The princess even started to worry she messed up by jumping into the conversation. Then, wouldn't you know it, they started praising her again for her wise words on the first day of the meeting. The ministers saw it like she wasn't doing it for her brother at all, and until the meeting ended, she was racking her brain, trying to figure out how to shift the focus to Aiden. She barely opened her mouth when the emperor decided to wrap things up. Sheena freaked out because her good intentions totally backfired. If this is how it ends, it'll be one massive screw-up. My brother just kept griping that his sister never learned to keep her mouth shut. He blew a gasket instantly, thinking the princess was trying to steal the throne. The next day was supposed to be all chill, enjoying the flowers and butterflies. But Sheena didn't see the point anymore, not with her brother breathing down her neck. She didn't even get a chance to clear up the misunderstanding and spend all night figuring out how to help Aiden. While the princess was lost in thought, Rubus came up to her. He was rushing, 'cause he was a little late, and immediately apologized for it. Only then did he give Her Highness a proper greeting. But Sheena wasn't mad at all. She was actually glad things were about to get a little more interesting. Taking his hand, she explained that being late wasn't a big deal. Everyone's got their reasons, right? No need to beat yourself up about it. Her Highness was just worried this kid might get hurt, you know? Though he's already got plenty of other wounds, both scars you can see and ones you can't. Fixing his hair, she noticed a huge one on his temple, and she got curious about where it came from. But then Russell called out to her, and she realized she'd gotten way too close. Though, she'd been acting like this with Sir Hilton since they were kids, and it was just normal. But she hadn't slept a wink because of the meeting, and just spacing out, she messed up. Sheena immediately apologized for touching Ruby's without permission, but he didn't say anything, just blushed like crazy and stared at the ground. Still, the princess thought he was kinda cute, like a little puppy. She suggested they get to training, but Rubus wasn't having it. He figured Her Highness should chill, since she looked beat. She took that as an excuse to ditch the workout. Reaching for a basket, she pulled out a jar of pudding, asking Rubis to dig in. She didn't grab any for herself, saying she'd already had her fill. While he enjoyed the treat, she'd just kick back and relax. Sheena's eyes were glued to Russell as he shoveled spoonful after spoonful. Seeing him eat just reminded her how adorable he was. In moments like these, the guy actually looked his age. It bummed her out knowing he had to kill so young. At 13, he was already a swordmaster, fighting just to survive the horrors of war. Out of the blue, the princess decided to bring up the war he fought in 2 years ago. But she immediately realized it might be a touchy subject for him. I mean, obviously Russell wouldn't have any good memories from that mess. Still, there was something she was curious about, though she wasn't going to push for an answer. She wanted to know if it was true that Wind wasn't connected to the raiders, and they were just desperate people. Rubus clarified that most of them were highly trained, which meant Wind sent soldiers, and that was a tough pill to swallow. Either way, only trained guys could have held out against the Empire for that long. Rubus also confessed that the Marauders were people suffering from hunger, but he didn't say if it was agonizing for him to deal with those people. Sheena understood that there was no other way, and the soldiers were clearly suffering too, and Russell decided to share a story with her, one he witnessed himself. Back then, a bunch of knights gathered in a clearing, discussing how things were going. They were even proud of what they were doing, thinking they were protecting their loved ones. And the princess realized that these were sacrifices that had to be made. Though Russell's words sounded like he was trying to comfort her. But these are sacrifices for those in power, and Sheena wants to do everything to make sure they weren't for nothing. While she was thinking about this, she caught a pleasant, fresh scent. It smelled like spring. The breeze tickled her nose, so she decided to chill while Rubies ate. Sheena barely closed her eyes when she suddenly found herself in a weird space. It was super dark all around, and she felt like she was floating in zero gravity. But then a room appeared, one she'd never seen before. Beyond the door was the prince, and they brought him the knight he'd been looking for. The princess saw it all like she was behind glass, with no way to interfere. And she freaked out when she saw they brought Rubies into the office. The prince started talking about how Russell's eyes were totally normal, and that the rumors about them being demonic were just a bunch of BS. And then, with a nasty, evil smirk, His Highness suggested the knight should give up his life. He said he had no reason to live anymore. And not just give it away, but give it to him, like completely own him. This was the future Sheena had read about in the novel. Soon the castle would be taken, and her ruthless brother would seize the throne. Just like she thought, these were the events she had to stop. Aiden ordered Russell to stay at the front, while he headed straight for the Emperor. Rubis had no choice but to obey. And then Sheena saw the whole nightmare, all the destruction soaked in blood. She also saw the report that Russell had died during the battle. Those words just flooded her brain with terror and dread. But in the next instant, she opened her eyes and realized it was just a dream. Russell was holding his hand above her, shielding her eyes from the sun. After the nightmare she'd just seen, it was so good to see him alive. But the sadness hadn't completely faded, even though she said she was okay. She also noticed that his eyes and even his hair and ears were flushed red. It seemed strange to her, like she was still stuck in the dream. But then she realized it was just the sunset reflecting off him. She wished she was wrong, but Russell confirmed what she was thinking. And Sheena freaked out, realizing she'd slept through her history class, which was supposed to be after lunch. Plus, because of her, Rubis missed his training, and she grumbled about him not waking her up. He admitted he wanted to take her to the palace, but couldn't even touch her without permission. The guy looked guilty, but Sheena thought the opposite. Training's super important for knights, after all. And because of her, Russell skipped practice without telling anyone. The princess was afraid he'd get punished, 'cause they're extra tough on the trainees. So she declared she'd go with him to explain the situation to the commander. But Rubis told her not to worry, 'cause Her Highness getting some rest was way more important. The girl looked at him, covering her mouth. Her feelings were all stirred up again. She just couldn't figure out why this guy was being so damn nice to her. Still, she asked him to explain that he was late because of her, if they started giving him grief. Back in her room, Sheena knew Ruby still wouldn't say it was her fault, and he might take the fall. Then he'll start pulling away, and getting close again will be way harder. The maid noticed the princess wasn't eating anything and decided to call a doctor. But the girl insisted she was fine, just lost in thought. And she honestly admitted she just didn't have an appetite right now. Joey, thinking it was fatigue from training, was telling her to eat up and get her strength back. If she only knew the princess had gotten a great night's sleep instead of training. Right now the maids are getting her bath ready and bringing her some milk. But what Sheena really needed was a magical gizmo to rewind time. Just then, Sir Hilton showed up to apologize for the late visit. And the maids, rushing to do their duty, totally bowled him over. Joey and Alice were seriously strong. They could have flattened Hilton if they wanted to, but they just shoved him aside, didn't want him getting in the way. Getting back on his feet, he started explaining that he'd already given all the students instructions. But the princess was more concerned about whether he'd seen Sir Russell, and she immediately yelled that the guy had missed training because of her. Sheena even felt bad for getting Rubis into trouble, but Hilton wasn't mad. He figured the guy had a pretty good reason for skipping practice. And he doesn't really have the authority to punish anyone, but the princess wanted to know if Russell had been disciplined. Convinced that he hadn't, she called Hilton an idiot for not stepping in. The knight was super bummed, thinking the princess now hated him, and then she started freaking out, trying to figure out what to do, because everything was going to be just like her worst nightmare. That's when Hilton tried to chill her out, explaining that Rubis didn't get that bad of a punishment. He just had to run 30 laps around the grounds, which isn't even really a big deal. But to Her Highness, that many laps at once sounded like total torture. I mean, she's ready to kick the bucket after only 3 laps, and he's got to do 30. Plus, because of the punishment, Russell's gonna miss dinner. Then she found out that when Hilton was walking over, Rubis was on his 25th lap. So if nothing went wrong, he should be finishing up right about now. The guy might just collapse from exhaustion, but Hilton's got faith in him. Still, the princess's legs practically gave out from panic, thinking her friend's gonna get hurt. Seeing her face fall apart like that, the knight was about to call for a doctor right then and there, but Sheena insisted she needed to go see Russell immediately. Carlos taught her, as a monarch, never to apologize for mistakes or bow her head to subordinates. He'd repeat it to her multiple times during each lesson, just so she wouldn't forget. But she's not a monarch, and she doesn't consider Russell a subordinate or lower in status. So she went to him and, bowing deeply, offered her apologies. She couldn't make it yesterday because Hilton wouldn't let her leave so late. But now she was in front of Ruby's, and she stayed bent over for a long time, feeling guilty that he'd been punished because of her. Rubis immediately assured her that nothing bad had happened and asked her to stand up, and she, on the verge of tears, couldn't understand why this young man was so kind to her. Truth is, she wanted to beg for forgiveness on her knees, but that would have freaked him out even more. So she just bowed, but she put her whole heart into it. And when Russell said again that she didn't need to apologize, she was relieved he'd forgiven her. Then she asked if he'd gotten hurt during his run. She repeated the question a few times, thinking he was just trying not to worry her. After all, Sir Hilton had said he could have fallen and taken a spill because he was so worn out. She suspected that's exactly what happened, and he was just hiding it. Figuring out how to check, she asked him to sit down for a sec. He didn't get it, but Reuben obeyed right away and plopped down on the grass. And in the next instant, the princess yanked off his boots and chucked them into the bushes. This was just so she could check out his legs and make sure he was okay. But when she rolled up his pants leg, the girl saw a huge gash on his ankle. Her eyes welled up, realizing Russell had lied about being fine. The wound looked so gnarly to her, like something bad was about to happen. But the guy didn't think the wound was a big deal, especially since they heal so fast. Still, the princess insisted on putting some ointment on it right away, worried about a scar. She'd brought the ointment with her, and now she got ready to treat the scrape herself. As she spread on the cool cream, she asked why Rubies hadn't told her he missed practice because of her, and he reassured her again that it wasn't necessary. But Sheena just got upset because everyone knows he's never late without a good reason, and still, he got hurt. And she planned to do the exact same thing to the leg of Sir Richard, the guy who punished him. Russell, once again, started insisting he was totally fine. He was being so sweet about it that Sheena had to pull out another trick. And then, letting out a quiet gasp, she clutched her heart with a serious look. Naturally, the guy got worried that the princess had some kind of health problem, and she just kept going on about how her heart couldn't take much more of this. Then, with a wink, she confessed it was because of Rubis's super cute smile. At that moment, the guy felt guilty again. He'd taken the princess's words way too seriously. But realizing she was just flirting, he got embarrassed and blushed all over again. She never could have imagined him acting so cute when she was reading the original story. They said nobody's ever seen Russell smile, but the princess was stoked to find out he actually does smile, and it's kinda cute. Suddenly, it hit her that she was the only one who'd ever seen it, and that freaked her out. Though, she gotta admit, it felt kinda special being the only one in the know, especially since everyone calls Russell the emotionless knight. Then it dawned on her that it was selfish to be the only one who got to see that side of him. While she was lost in thought, Rubies got all worried again, thinking something was bugging her, and with a straight face, the girl just blurted out that it was all his fault. The dude totally froze up, but Sheena grabbed his hand. Then she explained that it's because he's just too darn cute. She held his hand tight and only let go after he promised to smile like that more often. Rubis promised, and the princess was over the moon. After a while, she needed to get to work, even though she just wanted to nap. However, she asked Joey to bring her what she'd requested. A huge stack of envelopes was immediately placed before Her Highness. Hilton, who was there as her bodyguard, was even surprised by the sheer amount of work. These were all invitations to the banquet that Sheena had to deal with. But the maid, Joey, was more concerned about why the princess was wearing sunglasses. She'd been wearing them since morning, even indoors, but Sheena said it helped her get in the mood. Taking them off, she returned to the invitations sent by the girls before her coming-of-age ceremony. Alice was tasked with bringing 2 types of paper the princess could use to write her replies on. And Joey reminded her that Her Highness isn't even required to do this until she's of age. But she's decided to throw a tea party, which was a totally spur-of-the-moment thing. Hilton just thought it was adorable how grown-up their princess was getting. Actually, it was her mom who suggested she get some practice in before attending her tea party. No wonder Melissa's worried. Her daughter's got 0 social skills. The truth is, Sheena doesn't even want to host one of these get-togethers. But an event like this could help change the future. And this time, Her Highness is planning to invite 4 guests. Plus, she's already decided who, which is why she spent all night going through files. In Snowdon, only the most exceptional person can become the family's heir. Those ladies might not be in politics yet, but they've got a shot at leading their own families. And they will take charge unless something crazy happens. At Melissa's tea party, the princess is gonna have a tough time finding allies. But at her event, Sheena can hook Aiden up with some serious backup for the future. Before you knew it, Alice was already handing Her Highness some stationery. Also, after writing those invites, Sheena was planning on hitting up a certain spot. And she asked Alice to tag along, cause she wants to pick out a gift for her mentor. Later, she headed to the kitchen, deciding to bake something herself. Figuring regular desserts just wouldn't cut it to make up for Russell's punishment. Alice was standing nearby and pointed out that Her Highness was doing it wrong. She explained that you're not supposed to hit the dough in the test, but kind of draw a line with your hand. The princess started getting the hang of it, and soon a gooey, raisin-filled dough was ready. Alice was a good cook because her family's poor, and that's how they made a living. Even though she's an aristocrat, if she hadn't started cooking, they wouldn't have anything to eat. Hearing this, Sheena decided to make her her personal pastry chef and give her a raise. Alice was just happy to do everything she could to help the princess in the future. This pleased Sheena, and she suddenly decided to bake something other than sweet cookies. The maid found this decision a little strange, but Her Highness had decided to do it on purpose because she was going to give the cookies to her brother later, and Alice was happy to share the recipe with her. A little while later, both girls and the cook too were staring at the result, totally baffled. Sheena was absolutely positive she'd done everything right, but she ended up with these weirdly shaped things, like burnt-up lumps of charcoal. Noticing the looks from the cook and the maid, she realized this stuff was definitely not edible, but she wasn't giving up and decided to try again, hoping things would work out this time. Alice cheered her on, while the cook didn't know how to explain that cooking just wasn't her thing. The maid just wanted to help Her Highness out, and she sincerely hoped that with her cookies, she could get her feelings across to her brother, especially since Sheena decided to wrap up these cookies for Aiden, the ones she just made. The prince was holed up in his office, buried in paperwork. When there was a knock, he didn't even look up, just told them to come in. He figured it was just a servant with some news, but it was his sister, and she immediately apologized for interrupting. Aiden's face twisted with annoyance, but he asked what was up, and she confessed she'd brought him cookies she'd made, especially for him. They aren't too sweet, and she was sure her brother would like them. Still, the prince wasn't exactly jumping to accept the gift. He suspected Nishina had slipped something into them. Why else would she bring him treats? The princess felt a jolt inside. She never imagined her brother thought so little of her. She wasn't expecting a warm welcome, but accusing her of poisoning someone? That's a low blow. But with the Empress gone and all his allies ditching him, Aiden thinks Nishina being around is a threat to him. He hates her so much he questions everything she does. Right now, he's demanding she get out before he throws her out himself. Even his assistant, Oscar, tried to smooth things over, saying the prince was super busy. He offered to escort her out, but His Highness gave him a task first. Don't let anyone into the office, not without his express permission. Sheena was bummed. She just wanted to understand her brother. Now she's wondering why he even bothered trying to make good memories back then. Like, remember when they were just chilling by the fountain? Having a blast? Back then, the prince actually looked at his sister with kindness, even affection. And it stung, because Aiden used to mean the world to her. So she turned back to him, just asking for a couple of minutes of his time. Aiden figured the princess had completely lost it, waltzing right up to his table like that. He barely even got his mouth open to tell her to get lost. The girl, after taking a bite of the cookie, said she was there to clear up a little misunderstanding. His Highness was a little intrigued, so he decided to see where this was going. And Sheena, after swallowing a piece of the cookie to show him it wasn't poisoned, put the rest on her brother's desk, hoping he'd finally give them a try. Aiden eyed the package suspiciously, just as his sister was about to leave. Now she was all for Oscar walking her out, but she was worried her brother would just toss the cookies without even trying one. Either way, she wanted to give him something. Deciding not to push it, she left the office, closing the door behind her. The prince's aide escorted the princess all the way outside, where he dared to speak to her. He wanted to say something and begged her not to take it the wrong way. The guy told her to just stay away from the prince if she really cared about him. Oscar explained that Aiden was already going through a lot of crap. Then he went quiet, worried the princess would be pissed at him for being so bold. Still, she thanked him for caring so much about her brother, but she just couldn't grant Oscar's request, because she was dead set on getting closer to Aiden, no matter what. Then she headed off to class, telling Oscar they should hang out more often. The guy tried to argue he didn't have the right, but she was already gone. Watching the princess disappear around the corner, he figured she was going through a lot. But then, remembering His Highness, he was sure they were both worried just as much. Meanwhile, the princess was thinking about what had just happened in the office. She hoped that even if the prince didn't accept her gift with an open heart, at least her actions looked perfectly normal from the outside. The second bag of cookies was meant for Ruby's, and the princess considered just tossing it. Even though he's not one to complain, this could put him in a tight spot. In the end, Sheena decided to eat it herself and bake a new batch for Russell. Just then, Ruby's popped up right in front of her, and Sheena nearly jumped out of her skin. She got so startled she dropped the bag of cookies on the ground. Then she explained that she hadn't seen him coming because she was lost in thought. Rubis reached down to pick up the bag, but Sheena told him not to bother. But the dude already had it in his hand, and he saw the cookies inside. Not wanting him to taste that awful stuff, the princess snatched the bag right out of his grip. And making a face, she declared that this treat was definitely not for him. Russell froze, totally lost. What was that? And why'd the princess blow a fuse like that? Seeing the look of pure terror on his face, Sheena realized she'd screwed up big time. And she was scared that because she yelled, Rubis would start pulling away from her. She immediately started making excuses, saying it was her first time cooking, so it turned out awful and disgusting. But the guy started to melt when he found out it was actually made for him. And because the princess still feels terrible that he got punished and hurt, Sheena kept lamenting that she should have just asked the pastry chef, and she promised Russell she'd get him any other treat he wanted. But she was surprised when he reached out his hands, silently asking her to give him those cookies. Now the princess was in shock because those cookies weren't even edible. So the dude just apologized for being so forward with his request. Not knowing what was up with him, she just shoved the pouch into his hands. And only then did she remember she wasn't planning on giving him that crap. She couldn't exactly snatch it back though, cause she'd look like a total psycho, so she just warned him that if he didn't like it, he didn't have to eat that stuff. But when Rubis took a bite, he suddenly said he was actually digging it, and now Sheena was trying to figure out which one of them was crazier. At the same time, she started realizing that the more time she spent with this guy, the faster her guard dropped and he's supposed to, take her out. But right now, Rubis is actually becoming her comfort, and she offered to get him some milk to go with his cookies, but he turned her down. Lost in staring at him again, Sheena noticed a leaf stuck in his hair, and she immediately reached out to brush the little thing out of his silvery locks. But at her touch, the guy's cheeks instantly turned redder than his eyes. The princess froze for a second, feeling totally awkward, and then quickly pulling her hand away, she explained she was just getting a leaf off his head. But in her head, she was kicking herself, thinking she was acting like a total nutcase. Russell, on the other hand, just rummaged through his hair and pulled the leaf out himself, after which he announced that his hair was now perfect, and the princess couldn't figure out why he was so hung up on saying he was okay every single time. But something pushed her to seize the moment, and she asked if she could mess with his hair some more. She wasn't even surprised when Rubis agreed and tilted his head towards her. The princess immediately started running her fingers through his hair, like she was petting a little puppy. She was enjoying it so much, it felt like all her troubles were fading away. She just couldn't remember what that kind of thing was called. After digging around in her memory, she remembered it was like animal therapy. Like holding a bunny and stroking its fur, it's supposed to be kind of healing. And just like that, the princess kept running her fingers through Russell's soft hair. He was a little embarrassed and figured something was bothering her, but she said she was all good now, admitting that something pretty rough had happened to her earlier that day. But thanks to her mentor, she's starting to pull herself together. Sheen was really digging this therapy and asked if she could, pet Rubis some more. Of course, the guy couldn't refuse her, but he was blushing like crazy again. Soon it was the day of the tea party, and the princess was dressed to the nines. The maids had no clue what was so special about this party. But they were so happy with how Her Highness looked, they started tearing up. Hilton chased them off, saying they were just being a nuisance with all the waterworks. The princess was glad he showed up and asked him to get those maids under control. But when he saw her all dolled up like that, he couldn't help but get a little misty-eyed himself. He couldn't believe Sheen had grown up so much that it was time for her first party. The princess realized that this little emotional moment actually calmed her down a bit. She can't let some anxiety ruin everything, right? When she got to her guests, she thanked them for coming. As future heads of their families, she needed to convince them she supported her brother. Then, she introduced herself to everyone, knowing she couldn't mess up today. Especially not in front of these women who are super important to her plan. One of them, the dark-haired one, is Valentina Orson, daughter of Duke Orson. And then there's the blonde, Halsey Lauren, daughter of the Marquis Lauren. Their families are the Emperor's biggest supporters, and they've helped boost his political power. If those families side with Aiden, Deegan's definitely gonna name him his successor. Besides, the invited girls could become friends with the princess. Sheena's attention went to Halsey, who was her friend in the original novel. She was also the first friend the prince ever introduced. But, not wanting to get caught up in political games, they became important to each other. The friendship between these girls was strong, like a vassal's loyalty to their monarch. But because of that, Halsey and her family didn't side with the prince after the rebellion, and it led to a really bad outcome for them. Sheena hoped that this time nothing so awful would happen. Halsey noticed the princess staring at her and figured she wanted to say something. And she explained that she just loved the Marchioness's laugh so much she couldn't help but admire her. And while the other guests sipped her tea, the princess showered Halsey with compliments. Then Valentina, putting down her cup, decided to throw in her 2 cents, saying Lady Lauren looked less like sunshine and more like a tomato. Halsey actually got embarrassed, which the princess noticed. Still, they struck up a casual conversation about this and that. Some were into accounting, while others just liked hitting the shops. And then everyone noticed the princess had started taking fencing lessons. Sheena immediately flashed back to how she felt like she was dying after every practice, and admitted that she was struggling because she wasn't in great shape. But even with that problem, she found it super engaging. Her friends chimed in, saying it would get easier with time. Realizing this was her chance, Sheena claimed that empire management lessons were just too tough for her. With a look of regret, she fibbed, saying she was always getting lectured by her tutor. She quickly added that she's constantly being compared to her brother, who's better than her at everything. A heavy silence hung over the table after that. Sheena realized that some nasty rumors about the prince had reached them, so she declared that her teachers constantly praise her brother, holding him up as the prime example. After all, he's been successfully handling part of their father's workload for almost a year now, and the princess saw no reason why she was constantly being measured against her brother. She said all this to show just how much she supported him. But then Valentina protested, not understanding why Her Highness would think that way. Sheena jumped right in, saying she'd never dream of copying her brother because she respects him too much. She wanted to admit she wished he'd be the successor, but that could just make things worse. So she figured that would be enough for now, since this was their first time meeting. Out of nowhere, Haley pipes up that some people really do think Aiden is something special. Sheena couldn't believe the Lauren family's daughter was defending the prince so fiercely. Maybe it was just to avoid an awkward moment, but the princess was still grateful. And then Haley asked Her Highness what her hobbies were. The princess was caught off guard since she didn't really have any. She could have mentioned baking desserts, but that was more of a survival skill. Still, she confessed to the girls that she really loves reading books. 2 of the guests were shocked the princess liked to read, like it was some kind of freaky superpower. But after realizing they were both into it too, they remembered this one super popular novel. Written by Madame Fereza, it's been flying off the shelves in the capital lately. And usually this author writes stories about damsels and knights. The guests immediately started arguing about which novels they liked the best. They even started reenacting some of the more intense scenes. And at the climax, they were practically screaming like total fangirls. Listening to their excited chatter, Shine got curious about what this novel was even about. The way they were carrying on, you'd think they were gonna throw down over which knight was hotter. The princess was starting to feel a little awkward and just wanted to get out of there. Then it hit her. Knights were everywhere. A bunch were standing right next to them, and of course they were hearing the whole thing. Now Sheena was even more embarrassed, and she just wanted the conversation to be over already. After saying goodbye to the guests, the princess went to her room, where Joey told her to get some rest. But Sheena wasn't tired from hosting. She was drained for a different reason. Suddenly, she wanted to have her next tea party with just Joey and Alice. The maid was curious if the princess had made any friends, but she couldn't admit that she'd organized the tea party for a different reason entirely. Still, she needed to figure out which of the girls interested her the most as a friend. And she chose Lady Haley, who was the most modest and polite. The princess was especially happy that she was supporting the prince, and the maid was thrilled that her favorite was finally making a friend. Once her hair was done, Sheena got ready to head to practice. She was glad the get-together ended early so she could relax a bit, but it was time to get to class when suddenly she heard someone sobbing. Peeking around the corner, she saw Sir Hilton crouched against the wall, crying. His eyes were swollen from all the tears, and when he saw Sheena, he begged her not to do that kind of thing. The princess still couldn't understand what was wrong or what she had done, and he explained that it was too soon for Her Highness to do what the ladies were talking about knights doing. Sheena was disgusted by that. She wasn't planning on doing anything like that herself. She practically screamed that she'd never even thought about something like that. But then it hit her. She's not exactly a saint when it comes to guys. She remembered slathering ointment on Rubus's leg, and the way he looked at her while she was doing it. But hey, that was just a friendly thing, right? Except after Sir Hilton's comment, Sheena was starting to wonder if it was so innocent. But there was no way she was admitting she'd accidentally brushed against Russell's skin. So to avoid an awkward conversation, she made a quick exit. And Hilton? Now he was even more freaked out than before. He was starting to worry that the princess and Russell were getting a little too friendly. He wanted to catch up with Her Highness, but she was already running off, promising to talk to him later. Girl was determined to clear up this misunderstanding ASAP, cause Rubus could totally get the wrong idea. And after all that, now she's got to sentence him to death by training. The princess found him at their usual spot, where they always meet up. Sheena was totally out of breath. She was rushing so hard to find him and talk. She barely opened her mouth to explain everything when she froze up, and her words just vanished. Russell was just taking off his shirt to change, and the princess's eyes almost popped out of her head. Quickly covering her face, she tried to explain she didn't mean to catch him off guard, and while the guy turned away to get dressed again, Sheena totally snuck a peek. But now she was shocked by the scars on his back, and they looked super old. The novel didn't say anything about his childhood, since it focuses on the main character. And now Sheena realized she was wrong, thinking she knew everything about rubies. Now she understood how much pain he'd been through. Without thinking, she walked up to him and touched his scars, like she wanted to heal them. The girl felt so bad for him, and she wanted him to never suffer like that again. The second she touched his back, Rubus flinched away, like it was a reflex. That made the princess realize he was hurting, but he insisted he was fine. Then he asked her to turn around while he changed out of his soiled clothes. He quickly threw on a shirt while the princess was still reeling from the shock. It scared her that she'd messed up again without even realizing it. She'd only come to apologize, and she ended up making things even worse. The princess was half tempted to chop off her own hand, the way it kept reaching for rubies. Sheena imagined the rumors that would fly, and then they'd just execute her. And she couldn't deny she'd become a screw-up daughter, unworthy of her parents. Thinking about it, the princess could practically feel her hand getting lopped off. But right now, she just calmly apologized to Russell, even though she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. The guy turned around, and she clarified that she was sorry for accidentally touching him. Sheena was still holding her hand back, trying to keep it out of trouble. Seeing the pathetic look on the princess's face, he felt super bad for her. And like a broken record, he said it was totally fine. That's when Her Highness blew up, saying this whole thing was messed up. She gets that Rubis doesn't want to hurt anyone, but there are plenty of people out there who'll take advantage of his kindness. So he really needs to ditch the habit of saying everything's okay. Sheena explained that no matter his position, if he's uncomfortable, he should just say so. The guy just bowed his head in agreement, cause he wouldn't dare talk back to the princess. And she didn't know how to make it any clearer that he can disagree with her. Even if he doesn't like her, he can say it, but Rubus immediately objected, and stated that he actually enjoys being around her. Scratching the back of her head, Sheena then asked him to definitely speak up if he ever felt uncomfortable. But then she realized he's taking her words as orders, since he's answering without even thinking. And she really wanted to protect this good guy somehow. So she told them to let her know ASAP if anyone gave him trouble. She was sure she could handle any jerk who messed with him, and Russell agreed again. After that, Sheena repeated her request just to hammer the point home. Honestly, she was even happy she could protect him herself. She wanted to rid Rubis of the people who were hurting him, and she was ready to use her abilities and any means to do it. But to do that, she also needed to train hard to get tougher and stronger. A couple of days later, Sheena went for a boat ride with her mother. The princess had heard that her mother was super busy getting ready to become empress, and I was surprised she even found the time to help me get ready for this tea party. That's why I wanted to thank Mom for her time and for caring so much. But Melissa had already planned everything, plus she enjoys a little walk with her daughter. She admitted that even the emperor who's stuck in a meeting right now was jealous. Still, she's super happy to be able to spend time with her little girl. It makes her so happy that nothing anyone says can ruin it now. That's when the princess realized her mother wasn't telling her something. But it looked like Melissa also thought her daughter wanted to talk to her about something. The princess's mother was really perceptive, like she could see right through her. But if Sheena tells her everything, Melissa might just chalk it up to her being too young. The princess still wanted to tell her she was giving up her right to the throne, even though she knew it was hard for her mother to take a stand and oppose the empress. But Sheena knows Melissa did all this just for her, and if Mom thinks all her efforts were for nothing, she'll be devastated. Still, the princess had to say it and braced herself to drop the harsh truth, because this is for a brighter future for everyone, even if it hurts right now. And Sheena blurted out, asking if her mother hoped she'd become the Empire's shining star. Just like she figured, her mom's face immediately changed. A tense, silent pause fell, and it felt like it lasted forever. Sheena was already thinking she shouldn't have asked, but she doesn't want to take the throne. And now I had no idea how to convince Mom if she was against it. But then she suddenly said she'd always want me to be happy, no matter where I ended up. Those were the honest words of a loving mother, supporting her kid. All Melissa wants is for her little girl to keep smiling, and that's all that matters to her. Sheena's emotions welled up, and she fell into her mother's arms, who kissed her on the top of the head and promised she'd always have her back. Ever since Sheena got stuck in this story, she really hasn't had a single day without worry. And if that awful future happens again, then all this effort to find a way out will have been for nothing. She doesn't have it all figured out yet, but her heart feels calmer knowing her mom's on her side. The girl wanted to stay in this peaceful moment, even if just for a little longer. And Melissa was just happy to give her daughter peace of mind for as long as she needed. Now, Sheena knew one thing. If everyone's life was going to have a happy ending, it was thanks to her mom who gave her all her love. After a couple of minutes, the princess started heading back to her spot in the boat. But she was a little shaky from all the excitement, and the current was rocking the boat too. She felt a little embarrassed, acting like a kid when she was all grown up. But her mom was just happy, and still it was time to get going. Agreeing, Sheena got ready to press the magic stone, when suddenly she heard some kind of sound, almost like part of a word. She looked around and didn't see anyone, so the princess figured she was just hearing things. But then the voice came again, and this time it said the word child. Sheena started looking around again, trying to figure out who was talking. In the water, she saw a creature that looked like a person, its hair blending in with the water. Droplets of water floated in the air around this being, and it was staring at Sheena. The princess figured she was hallucinating from exhaustion, seeing things that weren't there. But when the creature spoke again, Sheena freaked out, realizing she wasn't imagining things at all. Meanwhile, the spirit leaped out, hovering above the water, and was as happy as a clam. The ability to see spirits usually shows up around 16, so Sheena was pretty surprised. But then she saw another spirit that looked like an elf, and judging by their babbling, they were definitely talking about her, the princess. The spirit girl thought she was totally awesome, which her buddy wasn't buying. Meanwhile, Sheena was trying to figure out how her powers popped up and decided to keep it on the down low from her mom for now, because if her dad finds out, he'll be even more pushy about getting her on that throne. And while she was blowing off the spirits, they were scratching their heads trying to figure out why. The spirit girl was especially bummed, 'cause she even put on a flower to get her attention. She started calling out to the princess again, hoping she'd turn around. But she didn't even flinch and just told her mom to hurry back. Sheena put her hand on the magic thingy again to get out of there. The spirit girl just couldn't believe the princess hadn't even acknowledged her. So she jumped back in the river to catch up with the boat and try to get Sheena's attention one more time. But the boat's engine kicked in and it was hauling ass away from that place. The spirit girl was practically in tears, but her buddy just stood there stone-faced. He even suggested that his friend somehow made the princess hate her. She started wailing, saying she'd definitely turn things around and be better. Back home, Sheena felt relieved that her mom was on her side. But another, more serious problem popped up, doubling the weight on her heart. She couldn't figure out why she suddenly started seeing spirits at her age. Hilton noticed the princess was upset and got worried, but she immediately turned it around on him, saying he looked like he was stressing about something big himself. She already explained about the tea party, so something else must have gone down. But the knight denied it, just asked her to rest after her walk. He even offered a friendly hug, which made Sheena wrinkle her nose. She hated that Hilton still treated her like a little kid. She tried to ignore him, then someone else caught her eye. Hugh Murray, the head of the hospital, with a pretty smooth voice. Coming closer, he greeted the princess politely. They hadn't seen each other in ages since he'd been stationed near Dryad Forest. But he got back last night and he's staying at the palace now. The princess was super happy to see him and immediately started asking how he was doing. When she asked if he was tired, Hugh suddenly remembered something. Word on the street was, while he was gone, Her Highness fainted from exhaustion. That was 2 months back, but Sheena swore she's back to 100% now. All that training's really paying off, she's gotten way tougher. Once Hugh was sure the princess was okay, he asked her to walk with him to the hospital. Just for a quick checkup, something she hadn't done while he was away. She didn't argue, seeing as how it could only do her good. Besides, Hugh's a top-tier water mage, one of the best in the whole empire. Murray also suggested Hilton get checked out, noticing he looked a little under the weather. That guy's a brilliant scientist, probably knows more about science than anyone. But Sheena shouldn't tell him about her abilities, or he'll run straight to her dad. She had a ton of questions, but decided to find the answers herself. Then Hugh took off, and the princess told Hilton her plans had changed. She announced she wanted to go to the Imperial Library, specifically the Snowden family's secret library, the one with all the guards. Plus, you gotta climb a crazy amount of stairs to get up there. But the princess kept pushing forward also to show how much tougher she'd become, though when she stepped onto the last step, she was shaking so bad, even the knights got worried. The staircase was just longer than she expected, but she made it. Now all that's left is to get inside and find info on the spirits, but nobody can find out. So she sent Hilton to Joey just for the time she's gonna be here, especially since this place is off limits to everyone but the Imperial family. Still, Hilton figured he'd stick around outside, just to make sure the princess got back safe and sound later. This library's packed with classified intel and some seriously restricted old books. Sheena even wondered if she could find what she needed, but she wasn't giving up hope. After poking around the shelves for a bit, the girl found the right book, written by Spencer Van Whitesnow, the 15th Emperor and a water mage. He put together a book of spirits so his descendants could learn more about him. People gave spirits names for convenience, but those weren't their real names. 'Cause being nature itself, they don't really have a name or even a fixed shape. Most of them show up looking like fairies, and they're loyal to whoever summons them. Once you've got that connection, mages can tap into elemental powers. Water mages, for example, have healing powers and become healers. Now Sheena understood why that spirit girl was calling out to her so desperately. But right now, she needed to figure out how to stop seeing spirits, and a way to slow down these abilities that were kicking in way too early. After flipping through the book a bit, the princess found what she needed. But when she read about the only way to get rid of them, she instantly started shaking in terror. She couldn't believe there wasn't another way, and the panic turned into straight-up anxiety. She got so worked up that in a fit of rage, she yanked her hand, and the book ripped in half. The thing is, once abilities show up, they don't depend on what you want anymore. They keep leveling up until they hit their max. Basically, there's no way to unsee the spirits, so she just has to learn to tune them out. Sheena couldn't even imagine how she'd manage that when they keep bugging her. After that outburst, the princess just felt drained, and she realized with a heavy heart that she had a tough road ahead. Before long, Sheena could run a full 5 laps, which she was stoked about, hoping she could start sword training tomorrow. The girl was super happy. She'd been waiting for this moment forever. But a week later, she was back to feeling totally wiped. Russell was teaching her the moves, but her hands kept shaking like crazy. She was trying her best, but things didn't always go as planned. Wanting to help Her Highness out, Ruby stepped closer to show her the best way to hold the sword. He lifted her hands a little to make it easier for her to balance it, and he adjusted her fingers, which were gripping the hilt way too tight. Just then, Sheena gasped, and Rubis realized he'd touched her hand without permission. He started apologizing, even though the princess told him not to worry about it, and she even kinda liked how warm his hands were. That compliment totally flustered him, which made Sheena laugh again. Then she asked him to keep the training going, but Russell suggested taking a break because she looked completely wiped out. After they both agreed, they settled down on a picnic blanket under a tree. The princess took a closer look at her mentor, noticing he didn't seem tired at all. He didn't even look like someone who'd just finished a morning workout. Then she asked when they were going to spar together. Since she's into fencing, she's got to give it a shot at least once. Even though she knew there was a huge difference in their skills and strength. But like Russell said, after about 30 years of hard training, she might have a chance. Realizing that was a super long time, she figured she'd just focus on bulking up and leave it at that. Then she pulled out a jar of treats. She brought something new today. The guy carefully took the jar and quietly thanked her. She noticed that despite her initial intentions, Russell seemed pretty chill. But she still wondered if he was really comfortable hanging out with her. Honestly, she was worried about getting in his way, since he's a busy guy. She just hoped that this time together was actually relaxing for him. And now the princess was challenging him to a fight, 30 years from now. She hoped that even after all that time, they could still smile at each other like this. A few days later, Sheena felt rested, relaxed, and light as a feather. She didn't have to go to training today because Russell was busy with his own stuff. Joey figured he was under the weather, but the princess had no clue. So she planned to check in the day after tomorrow, see if anything serious was up with him. She hadn't planned anything for today, but it looks like the maids got something up her sleeve and presented her with a book, a gift from Viscount Graham's daughter. Joey suggested Sheena get some reading done and went to fetch her some tea. The princess got curious about what kind of book the Viscountess had sent. The attached letter explained that it was a new novel by Madame Therese. Emily Graham also asked her to share her thoughts at their next tea party. Sheena was pretty ticked off, because she wasn't into those kinds of novels. She wanted to send the book right back, but that wouldn't exactly be polite. So she decided to take a peek, hoping it wasn't as bad as she thought. The novel is called The Knight's Mistress, and Sheena immediately knew what it was about. There's no way she could leave a book like that out in the open, so she started looking for a place to hide it. If Hilton found out, he'd be back on his high horse, lecturing her about proper behavior. The second she thought that, she heard his voice right behind her. The princess was so startled, she dropped the book and froze, totally freaked. He walked right in without knocking, since the door was already wide open. He couldn't figure out why Sheena was so scared, but then he got curious about what she was reading. Hilton bent down to pick up the book himself, and the princess's heart practically leaped out of her chest. When he saw the pages and his jaw dropped, Sheena immediately yelled that it wasn't her book. The knight turned around and unexpectedly told her she wasn't ready for sparring yet. He said she's too delicate. She could easily get hurt. That's when Sheena realized he hadn't exactly read the right part of the book. He really did read that Philip was following the mistress's orders and started sparring. He'd only learned to wield a sword a few months ago, and everyone expected him to lose. But the instant the two swords clashed, everyone suddenly realized this guy was going to be the best knight ever. Hilton realized the princess wanted to spar too, but he strongly advised against it, 'cause even a wooden sword could break a bone, and her muscles are like a sparrow's kneecap. While Hilton was carrying on, the princess demanded her book back, saying it was a gift, and after hiding it in the dresser, she asked why there was a different guard this morning. At the request of Sir Richard, who's away on assignment, Hilton was helping evaluate the rookie knights today. Truth is, he was just running his usual sparring session in front of them. They started holding these sparring sessions as a tournament last week, and today was already the finals. All the competitions were held in the mornings, and Sheena realized how tough it must have been for Russell. But she didn't get why he hadn't said anything about it. She would have let him get some rest then, and congratulated him too, because she's sure Sir Russell will take first place in the tournament. Hilton got curious why the princess was so confident in Rubus's success. Still, he admitted that this guy's sparring was a real spectacle. Unlike regular knights, he wasn't using a family or standard fencing style. It was really interesting to watch him use his own unique style. No matter what anyone says, Hilton thinks he's got potential. The princess got worried that Russell might be hurt, and Hilton calmed her down. Now she can congratulate him with a clear conscience, maybe with a treat. That's when Hilton started to suspect the princess might have a thing for Russell. But he shut that thought down right away, knowing that's just not possible. He even scolded himself for letting those thoughts creep in, telling himself he's just concerned. Later, Sheena went to the kitchen and helped out a bit with making pies and cookies. The cook made some sugar-free rolls separately, thinking the princess might want some. Sheena took a bite and thought they were tasty and light. She thought her brother would like them, but then she remembered how he suspected her of poisoning him. And now she was stuck, not knowing what to do, knowing she was probably going to get shot down again. Meanwhile, the baker offered to wrap up those rolls for her separately, but she decided to just grab the pie for now and come back for the rolls later. After getting rejected last time, the princess hadn't seen Aiden, especially since he's always busy. But even so, she could just suck it up and go talk to him again. Sheena didn't even understand her own behavior, because she was totally trying to get closer to him, and she needed to get her courage up to make the first move, 'cause there's no avoiding this. She's gotta face this head on, even if it goes nowhere, and then figure out what to do next. And then, Bam! There he was again. Sheena totally wasn't expecting to see him so soon. Aiden noticed someone was nearby, but when he turned around he didn't see anyone. The princess got so freaked out she bolted behind the corner. Her body just reacted on its own the second she saw her brother. But she did catch that the prince looked surprisingly cheerful. It crossed her mind that something good must have happened to him during training. Peeking out from the corner again, she suddenly noticed blood on his hand. And her heart started pounding even harder, realizing her brother was hurt. Now she couldn't stay hidden anymore and immediately went to him. Grabbing his hand, Sheena anxiously started asking what happened. The wound wasn't big, but the girl thought there was way too much blood. And she was about to call a doctor right away, but Aiden started to resist. Saying it shouldn't matter to her at all, he basically rejected her again. Sheena knew that, but leaving a wound like that could get infected. Aiden, seeing his sister wasn't planning on leaving, wanted to tell her to scram again. But the princess just reached into the basket wanting to help her brother somehow. And pulling out a cloth, she only asked to clean up the wound a little. He still needs to train after all, and she tied the piece of fabric around his arm herself. The prince gave Sheena a look of disapproval, and she knew she'd crossed a line. Because of this, Aiden would hate her even more, but she couldn't just ignore his injury. She only apologized for getting in his way, wishing him to be careful. The princess didn't know if he'd toss the cloth right away or how long he'd be ticked off about it. Thing is, she did it because she wanted to help, and then she sees the prince just walk right on by. That threw Sheena for a loop. She even turned around to make sure she wasn't seeing things. The dude just kept walking, not saying a word, but his hand was clenched tight around that cruddy bandage. The prince got back to his office, where his assistant, Oscar, was waiting with news. Apparently, His Highness has been keeping Count Albans waiting for half an hour already. But then the guy noticed the wound on the prince's arm and started fussing like a mother hen. He was about to call a doctor too, but Aiden shot him down again, said it'd be a waste of time, and then asked about the count. Hearing he was chilling in the drawing room, the prince told him to have him come to the office. Count Blythe Albans didn't waste any time and was sitting across from His Highness in under a minute. First, he gushed about the place, especially digging that tapestry. He'd heard the Empress herself brought in a master craftsman from back home to make it. But the prince didn't want to waste time on small talk and asked the guest to get straight to the point. So the guy dropped the news that the princess had gathered the daughters of influential families for His Majesty. Turns out Aiden already knew that and just got pissed that the Earl was wasting his time. Blythe went on, saying Her Highness had become chummy with the daughters of families who carry weight with His Majesty, and that since Aiden's mother died, Sheena had been slowly climbing the ladder. The prince's anger just kept building. He didn't get what Albans was implying. So he spelled it out. There's a meeting planned at his estate with people who are backing Her Highness. The Earl was hoping the prince would be there too, but he shot it down. He just doubled down, even angrier, saying if the guest didn't have anything important, he could get lost. Looks like the Count didn't get the hint to shut his trap. He just started yelling louder about offering his help. That's when Aiden told him to think about ways to make a barking dog shut up. That shut Blythe up, but more because he realized it was a threat, especially when the prince added that the dog might need its vocal cords snipped so it doesn't annoy everyone with its barking. When the Count finally realized he was about to get seriously messed up, he bolted out of the office like a scalded cat. Oscar saw him and peeked in, curious about what just went down, and His Highness was just glad the guy ran off with his tail between his legs. His Highness had already made up his mind about that guy. He's got to pick a side, and his intentions are pretty damn clear. It was obvious the Count had picked the prince's side, even though everyone's got the right to choose. Still, Aiden was pissed that this guy wasn't just cool with his, ambitions, and that he's getting closer and closer to the kid who's always just been watching from the sidelines. In a fit of rage, the prince slammed his hands on the table hard enough to spill a teacup, and the wound started bleeding worse, soaking the cloth red. The aide was worried that if it kept up like this, the wound could get seriously infected. Oscar insisted on calling a healer, but he was ordered to clean up the mess in the study first. The prince just slumped into his throne-like chair and got lost in his thoughts. He remembered his mother, always telling him he had to become the glorious son of the Empire, which meant he couldn't get involved with anything that could tarnish the prince's image. He absolutely can't give that other little punk a single break. His mother's words, that he had to become the Empire's shining star, kept echoing in his head. Meanwhile, Sheena went straight to Russell, demanding to know who hurt her brother, and with a guilty look, he confessed that he was the one who did it. The princess was taken aback, but for some reason, she felt even worse for Rubies himself. She understood it happened during sparring and wasn't about to scold him for it. Then she asked if her mentor had gotten hurt himself. He was fine, but he was eaten up with guilt for injuring the prince. Then Sheena told him not to beat himself up about it, because anything can happen during sparring. And then she admitted that she'd seen her brother, and he looked happy. His Highness Aiden's crushing it in all his classes, but fencing, that's where he really shines. And Russell, who's got even more raw talent, should give him a serious challenge. If I remember right, he said he loves going up against tough opponents. Still, the princess didn't think these two were supposed to meet this early. In the original story, Aiden and Russell didn't cross paths until after their coming-of-age ceremonies. And then it hit her, because she brought Rubies in as a mentor. Their meeting happened way too soon, and now who knows how things will play out. In the novel, Rubies was always by Aiden's side after he became emperor. He earned fame and respect as the emperor's sword and the youngest swordmaster ever. But nobody ever saw him as a person, just as a weapon. Sheena freaked, thinking Russell or she might kick the bucket way sooner than they thought. Thinking about it, she went so pale that Rubies got worried and offered to call a doctor. She immediately swore she was totally fine and told him not to sweat it. But the guy could see something was bugging Her Highness, and he offered to help out. Sheena got a little flustered, realizing she'd made him worry, and that made her cheeks flush bright red. But the thing is, even this knight's concern wouldn't solve the problem. So the princess asked him to listen carefully. She was going to talk to him about two super important things. First, she asked if she could call him Rubies. I mean, if he gets officially knighted, she'll have to call him Sir Russell from then on. And since she can only call him by his first name now, that's why she asked for permission. The dude was flustered, not understanding why Her Highness would even ask. Sheena even suggested calling him Ruby for short, which he immediately agreed to. He explained that the princess could call him whatever she liked. The way he said it was so sweet that Sheena herself blushed a little. And then she asked him to call her by her first name too, but Rubies couldn't bring himself to do it. She didn't get why, since he was not only her mentor, but also a friend. Still, Russell thought it would be way out of line if he got that familiar with her. So she just repeated that they were friends, and confessed she'd prepared something special to celebrate. And she pulled a pie out of the basket, one that didn't even get burnt this time. Sheena confessed she helped make it, 'cause it's a congratulatory pie. This was actually the second thing the princess wanted to talk about, and handing Russell the pie, she congratulated him on taking first place in the fencing assessment. Sir Hilton told her all about it. He's totally blown away by Rubies's skills himself. The guy suddenly got even more flustered, and the princess wanted to cheer him up somehow. Then she asked him again to call her by her name, but Rubies was completely against it. Seeing he wouldn't budge, the girl admitted she had another gift for him, warning him that if he refused it, she'd order him to call her by her first name. She gave him a favor ticket, and she'd listen to any request he had. The guy hesitated again, but then an idea popped into his head. He slid the pie that was between them a little to the side. Russell leaned in closer to the princess, like he was about to whisper something, and very quietly asked if Her Highness would allow him to hold her hand. A silent pause hung between them, and it felt like forever. The princess's face instantly turned a bright shade of red, except for her two blue pupils. She thought Rubies was proposing marriage or something super romantic. As soon as she could speak, she explained that they weren't that close yet. The guy apologized for being forward, saying he just couldn't forget how Sheena touched him recently. The girl was stunned, not remembering that ever happening. And Rubies brought up that she'd touched his hair a few days ago. Turns out the dude wanted her to mess with his hair again. The princess said it wasn't a problem at all. She actually enjoyed it. Then there was another pause, but this time Russell was waiting for Sheena to stroke him. The girl still couldn't get the color back in her face. She just nodded, saying she was ready to get started right now. So Russell bowed his head to her and looked down, trying not to make her uncomfortable. The princess carefully ran her fingers through his hair, gently touching his skin. Her shock had worn off, and she offered her mentor something more as a reward. But the guy preferred it this way. It was the first time someone had touched him so gently. And Sheena got it, especially since she herself loves having someone play with her hair. When she was a kid, she got her head patted a lot, and she was surrounded by affection. Unlike this kid, whose childhood turned out way tougher. And now Sheena wanted to give him kindness and tenderness, just like her mom did for her. After stroking his hair for a bit, she suddenly stopped, but not because she was bored. She hugged Rubies with genuine tenderness so he could feel the warmth. She also whispered softly that he was her friend and she was super proud of him. Russell, afraid to move and ruin the moment, thanked her for that. And Sheena asked him to call her by her name, not her title, in moments like these. She knew it would be hard for him to do right away, but she asked him to call her Sheena in the future. A week later, the imperial family gathered for another meeting. Sheena noticed her brother had finally gotten treatment, and his wound was healing. It was too early to say they were closer, but at least he took her advice. They were waiting for their father, who soon arrived, and the meeting could begin. They'd be discussing Win's proposal to increase grain production instead of giving up part of the forest. They're still demanding the whole territory, but the Empire can't agree to that. Even if it means all-out war, Emperor Dagon refuses to give them what they want. The ministers started arguing it would be better to give in to avoid a conflict. They complained he'd forgotten the benefits and help they'd gotten from the Blessed Forest. Someone declared they couldn't rely on a forest that couldn't even develop on its own. The Chancellor was supposed to tell us about the measures to protect the magic stones, and he claimed we could make up for the missing ones with spirit stones. Said they're good for the long haul and we'll get benefits down the line. Thing is, spirit stones are way too expensive for regular folks, so the Chancellor suggested selling the more popular ones at a discount. Some of the ministers were still worried that war could break out any minute, especially with their succession fight, but that's supposed to stay within their borders. Still, just in case, the Emperor decided to beef up the military and send out an expedition. And if the Kingdom of Wind officially declares war, then Prince Aiden will be put in charge of the armed forces. The princess was worried that things had ended up like this. She knew Aiden would go to war, and victory would earn him the people's trust. But his path wouldn't be easy, and Sheena wanted to be by his side, to ease his loneliness. But there was no way anyone would let her go to war too. After all, not only did she lack any fencing skills, she was weak as a kitten. Suddenly, an idea struck the princess. Sheena remembered her awakened gift. She could see spirits. She was going to hide it until her brother was named heir, but things hadn't changed. Aiden is her precious brother, and she wants to help him with her abilities. So Sheena decided to head to the lake after the meeting and talk to the spirits. That's when she heard a delegation from the Rhine Kingdom would be arriving for the prince's birthday. And it wasn't just some representative, the queen herself decided to come. Hearing that, the princess was a little thrown. I mean, that queen is the late empress's sister, but she didn't even show up for the funeral. You'd think she'd be worried about her nephew now. But the thing is, Rebecca Rhine will turn on Aiden after pushing him to rebel. Sheena started racking her brain on how to keep that woman away from the prince, but her father already agreed that someone of high rank would greet her. Then one of the advisors suggested that the prince himself should do the honors, since Queen Rhine is coming specifically to meet with her nephew. When Aiden was asked, he swore with a stone-cold face that he could handle the assignment. Not wanting to leave him alone with that lady, Sheena also volunteered to go to the meeting. She explained it by saying she wanted to help her brother out, and she was sure her help to the queen as a woman would be more useful. The prince tried to argue, but Sheena insisted she just had to help. Then, almost invisibly, she clenched her fists, praying her dad would let her go with her brother. Since she demanded it so forcefully, the emperor couldn't refuse his little girl. The girl was so happy it was like she'd won the lottery. But her joy was being burned by her brother's angry, devouring glare. After the meeting, Sheena went to the lake as planned, making sure she wasn't being followed. Leaning over the water, she quietly started calling out to the spirits, hoping they'd show up right away. But when nobody appeared, she got louder, begging the spirit master to come to her, just once. For a while longer, silence continued to reign over the water's surface. And the princess couldn't figure out why no one was coming to her. She can't take a boat either, since this is a secret visit. Sheena even thought about swimming to the middle of the lake so she could call the spirits from there. Suddenly, she noticed a creature pop its head out of the water, looking like a blue otter. The princess hadn't heard of animals like that, but the creature's eyes seemed familiar. And then she remembered that spirits don't have a fixed form, so they can appear as animals that represent them. Getting a closer look, Sheena realized it was the same spirit girl who'd spoken to her before. The spirit floated over to the princess and asked if she could have a word. Sheena immediately explained that she'd ignored them last time because of, stuff going on, and she asked her not to be mad, hoping she hadn't hurt her feelings. But the creature just grinned, touched by the princess's honesty. She even reached out a little paw, which Sheena gently touched with her fingers. She still felt bad about blowing her off last time. She was just so darn cute. As an apology, the princess asked the otter to accept a gift from her. She took the ribbon from her hair and tied it in a pretty bow around the creature's neck, saying that the blue really suited her and she was super happy. But then this wisecracking willow spirit shows up and starts making fun of my friend's look. Sheena didn't even notice the second spirit pop in and figured he'd been tailing them. Still, she told him to lay off the spirit girl because the ribbon's actually pretty cute. She even promised to bring a waterproof ribbon as a gift next time. The blue otter was so stoked that her face lit up even brighter. Spirits have feelings too, and when a water spirit gets bummed, they kind of fade out. Which makes it pretty clear that water mages are probably pretty sensitive too. And that's when Sheena realized her sympathy for Aiden and Ruby's might be the water spirit's influence. But she's not a mage yet, and told the spirits she just came to talk. Then she explained that, due to certain things, nobody can know about her skill, so she can't become a mage just yet. The book says mages can recognize each other, especially strong ones can sense the weaker ones. And there's a high-level elemental mage in the castle, so Sheena could get exposed. Still, the princess promised the spirit she'd definitely make a contract when the time comes. But for now, she suggested they just be friends and introduced herself to the spirits. The boy spirit got all huffy. He doesn't like making friends, plus water mages are a drag. And when Sheena asked what to call them, he got all indignant again, 'cause they don't have names. Still, the princess wanted to get close to them, so she couldn't just call them spirits. Then the willow spirit remembered that people used to call him Selic, and the water spirit asked the princess to give her a name, so she could be special to her. So Sheena decided to call her Ver, which means spring, 'cause she first saw her in the springtime. The water spirit dug that name and asked the princess to look after them. Sheena was stoked that she was off to a good start with these spirits. Then, Her Highness headed to the training grounds to catch up with Russell. On the way, she heard he'd gone around the corner towards the building's window. Getting closer, she suddenly overheard some insults, someone getting trashed as a real lowlife. Then she saw a bunch of guys beating on Russell, calling him a freak. The princess couldn't believe her usually upbeat friend was just taking it. They were jealous he took first place and figured it was some kind of cheat. The main bully didn't buy that their loss was legit. One of the guys actually agreed with the result, which just pissed off his buddy even more. And he was also pissed that Russell got the princess's mentor gig. When his buddy agreed, the disgruntled knight suggested taking things further. Harry asked where exactly, and the guy gave him this wicked grin. He decided to show Russell his place, like the devil's reject he is. The guys were salty that Ruby's had gotten so much, like he was riding a lucky streak. And if he got it all through dumb luck, he needs to know his limits and back off. Russell didn't even think he was the right guy to help Her Highness, and he understood why these guys were demanding he resign immediately. For the first time, greed took hold of him, but even if it only lasted a few minutes. Until they kicked him to the curb, Rubis wanted to stay close to her, so he straight up told those bullies he wasn't doing what they wanted. The knight, already ticked off, got even angrier. So angry, in fact, that he punched Russell right in the face, leaving a mark on his cheek. And then they started calling him a demon spawn and a low-life scumbag. The old Rubies would have returned the favor, punch for punch. But he didn't want Her Majesty to worry, so he held back. That's exactly when the princess showed up and decided to step in. The knight snapped to attention, totally surprised to see her. She demanded an explanation right then and there, and warned them not to even think about lying. Rubis was the first to speak up, saying he was just having a friendly chat with his buddies. But Sheena wasn't buying into their chivalrous BS, and figured she'd be next on their hit list. I mean, they didn't hesitate to treat her mentor like dirt, so she knew it'd be even worse for her. Their attitude seriously ticked off the princess, and she made it clear, from now on, any disrespect aimed at Sir Russell would be considered a direct insult to her, and messing with a member of the royal family comes with serious consequences. She suggested they watch their mouths if they wanted to keep them. Then, the princess offered her hand to her friend and told him to come with her. Rubis followed her, and those knights were kicking themselves for getting caught out. On their way, it started raining, and Rubis suggested Her Highness find some shelter. He even offered to find someone to fetch an umbrella. But then he noticed Sheena's face, sad and judgmental at the same time. He figured something was bothering her, but the princess wanted to know why he was acting like that. Specifically, why he silently took those insults and didn't even get mad. That's what ticked the princess off, but Russell didn't know how to explain his choice to her, and she reminded him that he should call her if anyone started messing with him. Sheena didn't scold him for long, then she touched his bruised cheek, and Russell felt like something hot was pressing on his chest. He'd be better off if she looked down on him, like everyone else did. His earliest memories start in an old warehouse with no windows, and there was only one lamp that worked, but it was way too dim. The darkness didn't scare him, he just felt like if the lights went out, demons would drag him down to hell, since his eyes were just like theirs. Russell wasn't allowed outside, but a spark of hope was growing inside him. And one day, he decided to leave that room, which had a window right outside. That's when Ruby saw the sky for the first time, and it captivated him so much he forgot the real danger. The reason he was locked up, Ruby's was considered a cursed spawn. They kept telling him someone like him wasn't allowed to enjoy the sight of the sky. And when they saw him outside his room, they immediately smashed a wine bottle over his head, saying he better not walk around with his head held high until he gouged his own eyes out. The shards fell near the boy and he cut his fingers. His own father wanted him to use these shards to gouge out his eye. Rubus reached for his brother standing nearby, but the guy didn't even flinch. Then he just turned away, like he was too disgusted to even look at Ruby's. He just said someone like him never should have been born in the first place. Those words cut deep, especially coming from his own family. But Rubus agreed, though it was more out of desperation than anything, because after that they sent him to battle, forcing him to kill people. And he often had to wash himself in the blood of others. That's why Rubus thought someone like him didn't deserve to live. He was sickened by the fact that his life was like a total nightmare. Even after he joined the squad and started training with the others, they still looked down on him. They were always calling him a freak, saying he was just getting in the way. A few guys were kinda neutral, but nobody wanted to be his friend. Everyone figured they'd rather kick the bucket than share a room with some dude with red eyes. Then the princess showed up on the training grounds out of nowhere, but he didn't even notice. He just listened to the others gossiping about why she was there. He only glanced at her when the knights started going on about how hot she was. But it didn't change anything for him, 'cause he'd already accepted his life was a total drag. Still, his brain kinda short-circuited when the princess called him handsome. And when she looked at him like she was impressed, Rubus thought he was dreaming. Something told me this dream was about to turn into a total nightmare. Then the guy turned away, figuring the princess was feeling awkward. Right then, they called a break and started handing out snacks that Sheena brought. When it was his turn, Richard told him to take the gift and be grateful. The guy had lost all faith that there was even one person left who'd be nice to him. But then the princess announced she specifically wanted him to be her tutor. And Rubus was thrown for a loop, not understanding why Her Highness was smiling at him like that. He could hear the other knights bad-mouthing him again, calling him cursed, and he realized the princess didn't know anything about him, and she might seriously regret this later. But not only didn't she change her mind, she begged him even harder to say yes. After that, Russell didn't see how he could refuse this young lady, especially after she gave him those puppy dog eyes, the cutest thing ever. You just can't say no to a look like that, and Rubus silently nodded. The princess was so happy she grabbed his hand and started thanking him. The guy was taken aback, because even when he saved his comrades during the war, he didn't get thanked like this. His feelings were all mixed up at that moment, but he was afraid of hurting her. Then Richard called him over and explained that Her Highness wanted to learn fencing, and asked him to be careful with her, since she doesn't know anything about it. Rubus agreed, even though he was sure he'd be tossed out before he could even show his skills. But time went on, and the princess didn't even think about getting rid of him. And she didn't look down on his eyes, but instead said they were really beautiful. The guy couldn't figure out why this girl was being so nice to him and didn't hate him at all. He still couldn't wrap his head around the princess's thoughts and actions. Now that she'd pulled him away from those nights, he was thinking about it again. And when Sheena called out to him, she wasn't mad, understanding that everyone has trouble focusing sometimes. She just suggested he get some rest when he felt like that. Rubus immediately thought about the sky, which he loved to look at so much. And when the princess held out her hand, offering to relax together, he realized that she was the one who allowed him to admire the sky in this nightmare. In the pitch black, he saw a light and warmth seeped into a long-forgotten pain. It stung, but Rubus finally got what happiness meant, and he wasn't about to let this dream slip away. Every time he saw the princess smile, he just wanted her to smile like that forever. And even if that smile wasn't meant for him, he'd still be happy just seeing it. That's why it twisted the knife to see Sheena crying in the rain like this. He just wanted this girl to always be happy, plain and simple. So he cupped her face, wanting to chase away her sadness, and told her not to cry. Plus, he called the princess by her first name, which totally caught her off guard in a good way. Sheena couldn't believe her ears and asked him to say it again, just to make sure she wasn't imagining things. Rubus, though, got all flustered and blushed like crazy, right up to his ears. But the princess repeated her request, wanting him to say it one more time. He wanted to, but fear choked him up and he froze. Then he finally said the princess's name again, and this time it sounded so gentle. Just then, the rain stopped, and Her Highness perked right up, and she asked Rubus to go with her, even though he was worried about training. Sheena pouted again, not getting why training was more important right now. And when the guy apologized, she realized she'd accidentally snapped at him. Then she started apologizing to him for her little outburst. And she almost teared up, she was so touched, when Rubies looked down again. Still, she didn't understand why innocent Russell always got the short end of the stick. In moments like these, her heart just breaks every time. And then she took him to this place, and when he saw it, he was totally blown away. They walked into her office, and everything was super fancy with tons of plush furniture. The princess told Rubies to make himself comfortable and not to be shy. She wished he could relax in her room, but if her dad found out, all hell would break loose. But hanging out in the office shouldn't cause any problems. Just then, Alice and Joey came running in, like something was seriously wrong. They were worried the princess was back early and figured she'd gotten hurt again. She shook her head no, but pointed to her friend, and the maids noticed a bruise on his cheek, like the size of a handprint. Joey immediately offered to get some medicine or call a doctor. Rubies tried to argue, but Sheena snapped at him not to dare say he was okay today. She knew he felt awkward, but she wanted to get him the best care possible, though she had a feeling this might be a real burden for Russell. Then she ordered the servants to bring them medicine and tea with sweets, and when the maids had set the table, she asked them to leave them alone. They agreed in a heartbeat, telling her to just call if she needed anything. And once they were alone, the princess decided to tend to her friend herself. Since she hadn't called a healer, she'd apply the ointment to his wound herself. Rubies was embarrassed, saying he could handle it, but there wasn't a mirror in the room. So the princess asked him to trust her, promising to make it painless. I promised him the sooner we finished, the sooner we'd get to that sweet dessert. The kid blushed like crazy, like always, but he agreed. And Her Highness carefully scooped up a little bit of the ointment with her fingers. She started gently applying it to Rubies's cheek, trying to be as gentle as possible. But she still had this nagging feeling that we just showed up here. It would be the right thing to tell Sir Richard about what happened. After all, the guy got messed with by those other guys, and he didn't even stand up for himself. But Russell made it clear again that he was okay, though he put it differently. The princess hates that he doesn't value himself at all and thinks he's worthless. But she didn't want to force him to do anything either, so she promised not to say anything to Sir Richard. But in return, she asked him to promise her something and held out her pinky. Rubies had to promise that from now on, no one would be able to disrespect, insult, or hurt him. The guy hesitated. It was a really tough promise for him to make. Still, he linked pinkies with the princess and promised to do his best. Because of that, a wide smile spread across Her Highness's face again. But she warned him that if he broke his promise, he'd face a terrible reckoning. Just then, Hilton burst into the room, looking as worried as if the sky was falling. He figured she'd hurt herself again, but he stopped dead when he saw her with Rubies. He was speechless when he saw how close the two of them were sitting. From where he stood, they really did look like a couple on a date. Of course, the princess filled him in later, but told him to keep it zipped. And Hilton agreed, but now he was begging to watch her train. Sheena shot him down, saying it was just a misunderstanding in the room, and she was just applying some ointment. This went on for a whole week, and Her Highness was getting seriously worn out. After another training session, Sheena decided to go visit her brother again. On the way, she spotted a salvia flower with red buds. It reminded her of Aiden collecting them, even though he promised his sister something yummy. And the princess couldn't figure out how there could be anything sweet in flowers. But the prince plucked off a petal and held it out to his sister, asking her to try it. The girl chewed a little, and the taste really was incredibly sweet. Afterwards, Aiden asked her to keep it a secret from her nanny. He also asked her to call him brother, but the princess preferred to call him by his name. Back then, the prince didn't argue with her. He even found it kind of cute. And now, looking at these flowers, Sheena was overcome with nostalgia. She was only distracted by Russell's voice. He'd come up so quietly she didn't even hear him. He was surprised to see her eating petals, but the princess asked him to sit next to her. After rummaging around in her basket for a moment, piquing Russell's curiosity, she gave him a petal just like hers and asked him to taste it, warning him that he shouldn't just chew it, but rather suck the juice out. Rubies took the petal in his mouth like a whistle and did exactly as she instructed. After that, he agreed the flavor was seriously sweet. And Shine liked how that red petal really brought out his features. If it weren't for that scar, the one that's still there, it'd be even better. Still, it's almost healed, and Rubies credits the princess's ointment for that. Her Highness was worried it would leave a mark on that handsome mug, and she told him to keep using the stuff until it was completely gone. She was also glad he hadn't picked up any new scrapes, which meant those guys backed off. Her warning must have been enough to keep anyone from messing with Russell again, especially since he promised her he wouldn't just take that kind of crap anymore. Now she just had one problem left, patching things up with her brother. Sheena got so lost in thought, her face changed, and Rubis noticed it. He didn't want Her Highness to be sad about anything, period. So, turning to her, he bowed his head slightly, reminding her that petting his hair always cheers her up. Sheena insisted she wasn't down, especially since his wound was healing, but he knew it wasn't about his injury. He could tell something else was bugging her. Realizing she couldn't hide anything from this guy, the princess decided to come clean. She admitted that she had another important task after training, and that she was worried sick she'd screw it up and cause trouble for everyone else. Rubis assured her that she'd nail it, just like she nailed the training. Feeling something inside pushing her, Sheena agreed to Russell's proposal, and she plunged her fingers into his hair, running them through it again like she was searching for something, all the more pleasing to her that Rubis himself had asked her to do it. Somehow, this kid, with a word or a gesture, filled the princess with courage, and thanks to his support, it seemed to her that she could move mountains. But when they later brought her a whole stack of material to study, she realized she was wrong. The prince forced her to learn all this, and she had to get it done by tomorrow. It was like he wanted her to give up, because there's no way to learn that much in that time. Aiden even straight up said that Sheena could back out right then and there if it was too much for her. After all, he doesn't intend to keep a totally useless assistant around. That was a pretty harsh and insulting thing to say to a princess, and she immediately yelled that she'd learn everything, down to the last line, by tomorrow. His Highness just smirked, totally sure his sister was gonna screw up. Then he decided to end their meeting for the day, but Sheena wanted to help him with something else. To which he said the only thing he could give her was more stuff to study. And he repeated that if she wasn't confident, she could just bail. So the princess just grabbed the stack of papers and went off to study. The next day, she aced her brother's exam, reciting everything he needed to know for the delegation's arrival. His assistant Oscar couldn't believe the princess had learned it all in one day. But to do it, Her Highness had wrapped up some other business ahead of time. Judging by the prince's face, even he didn't see that coming from his sister. He had to admit, Sheena really had learned absolutely everything. He still had his doubts, but she kept saying she could handle it. She even offered to cram something else right now if she wasn't up to snuff. The girl was genuinely asking her brother to help him out with this gig. For a while, Aiden just stared at her, silently weighing the pros and cons. As much as he didn't want to, he agreed to let her work in his office. He warned her she had to be ready for anything, but Sheena was stoked. With that, he said goodnight, and his assistant told Sheena to call him Oscar. The princess flashed a satisfied smile, because a new chapter of her life was beginning. But the second she stepped out of the office, she felt her whole body start to tremble. Sheena couldn't believe she'd be working side by side with her brother, and she decided to share the awesome news with the spirits ASAP. The princess headed to the lake, skimming a leaf across the water, calling for Vare. But when nobody showed up for a while, she started getting pissed. And just then, a hand shot out of the water, snatching the willow leaf. Then Vare popped up completely, stoked that the princess had come to visit. Even though they'd seen each other yesterday, the spirit girl had already missed her. But seeing Sheena's angry face, she figured she was hurt and needed a medic, stat. While Sheena was trying to explain that she was totally fine, Selleck called out to them. He noticed the princess looked worried and asked what was up. Sheena admitted she just hadn't slept all night, but otherwise she was fine. Then she shared the good news that she'd be working with her brother from now on. That was great news, but it also meant she'd be seeing the spirits less often, which bummed out Vera, since she'd really gotten used to the princess. But the truth was, she'd be super busy and wouldn't be able to visit as much. If it weren't for Hugh and the other mages, she could just carry them around in her pocket. Vera was sad, but she understood that this was something Her Highness needed to do, and she hoped that when she was done, she'd come back to them, 'cause they'd miss her. She also told the princess to clean herself up and not go around looking so rough. Sheena's ready to roll. She's got to stop the queen from getting cozy with Aiden. But a few days later, the princess felt like a walking corpse. Aiden's got new duties, and he's cranking out documents like crazy. Her eyes were practically bugging out from reading nonstop. Plus, she was worried about her brother, who's been locked in his office. Sheena tried to clear her head, 'cause all that worrying wasn't going to shrink the stack of papers. Then she got her hands on the menu list from Scarlet Castle, where the queen's staying. Before she knew it, the princess's head just smacked the desk. When she finally woke up, it was night, and she had no idea how long she'd been out. Turning around, she saw a blanket draped over the back of her chair. Thing is, she didn't bring it herself, so she figured Oscar must have done it. But then she glanced at her brother, still glued to the table, and realized it could have been him too. Not wanting to play guessing games, Sheena just straight up asked if he was the one who covered her with the blanket. Deep down, she was hoping he was finally seeing how genuine she was being. But his answer was way harsher than she expected. He noticed she was dead tired and told her to go home and not bother coming in tomorrow. To Sheena, that sounded like he didn't want to work with her, like he was trying to get rid of her. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the right words. Aiden would just chew her out for falling asleep, so all she did was beg for another shot, promising it wouldn't happen again and she'd stay focused on the job. So the prince explained he had other commitments tomorrow, so she didn't need to come in. Whatever she had left, she could easily finish up the day after. And then it hit the princess. Her brother wasn't kicking her out, he was just giving her a day off. She was actually stoked that after all this time she could finally get some proper rest. Still, she was worried that her brother would keep grinding away without taking a break himself. Even after sleeping in, Sheena still felt groggy at breakfast. Mom was worried the work was too much for her and suggested she take even more time off. But the princess wasn't backing down, especially since she wasn't even doing half of what Aiden does. To which her father replied not to compare herself to him since she's still so young. Sheena wanted to point out that her brother wasn't exactly ancient either, but that would probably just make things worse. Dad always used to take her side in situations like this, you know? And she didn't want Aiden to get hurt because of it again. So, to change the subject, Sheena apologized to her mom for not being able to make it to the tea party. Melissa wasn't mad. She said there'd be other chances, and right now, Sheena should focus on getting better. Dagan backed up his wife, assuring the princess she shouldn't sweat it if she couldn't handle the job. Sheena wasn't totally following, so he reminded her about how she wanted to be involved in planning the event before becoming the successor. But it's never too late to learn, even after she officially takes over. Sheena immediately shot back, saying she just wanted to help her brother out. But her parents thought her hard work would only benefit her in the long run. Realizing they weren't listening to a word she said, she knew she wasn't coming across the way she wanted. And now Mom and Dad are leaning towards her becoming the successor. Even though Melissa wasn't rushing to put too much on her daughter's shoulders, she reminded her husband that they needed to support her in everything. The Emperor was just worried that Sheena would feel awkward as the heir, and the girl was grateful her mother found the right words. Still, the princess has got to somehow explain to her dad that it was all a misunderstanding. But she can't shake this worry about Queen Rain being around Aiden. After breakfast, Sheena was gonna head to the castle, but figured it'd be better to check on Russell. She asked Hilton, who was trailing right behind her, when the knights get a break. He said they weren't getting a break, but the princess already knew that. And then Hilton reminded her that she shouldn't even go there in the first place. The princess didn't want him getting bent out of shape, cause he could tear this whole place apart. And since she had nowhere else to be, Sheena decided to head back to the castle. But then she remembered that Hugh had invited her to visit the hospital, so she decided to go there and grab something for her exhaustion while she was at it. When Her Highness showed up, Hugh was super happy she finally found the time. She was a little late, sure, but he understood she was swamped. She left Hilton waiting by the doors, since outsiders aren't allowed during checkups. Then she settled onto the couch so Hugh could take a look at her health. So he summoned his assistant for this, a spirit he called Nana. Before, the princess only ever saw a swirling ball of water in his palm, but now, because her own powers were kicking in, she could clearly see the spirit's figure. Still, she pretended she didn't notice the thing at all, like always, and she made sure not to make eye contact so it wouldn't discover her powers. Then, Nana was tasked with checking the princess's health, and it swirled around her in a thin stream. After that, it whispered something in the mage's ear, and his face suddenly changed. Sheena immediately got worried, hoping her secret was still safe. But then he asked if she'd been in contact with a spirit recently. The princess's heart nearly jumped out of her chest, thinking her secret was out, but she immediately explained that she'd met with wind mages while preparing for the delegation. Still, she was curious how Hugh figured it out, hoping it wouldn't affect his health. He just explained that Nana sensed the aura of other spirits, but now everything was clear to him. As for his health, he assured her that the princess was doing just fine. The only thing was, he advised her to be careful because of accumulated fatigue. This was exactly the moment when Sheena could ask him for some medicine, but then he confessed that she wasn't the only one struggling with exhaustion. His Highness the Prince spiked a pretty high fever today. After all, he'd spent a week pulling all-nighters, and obviously it took a toll on him. But even so, the prince was being stubborn, wanting to finish the job. Aiden's still grinding away, even though Oscar was practically begging him to get some shut-eye. Out of nowhere, the princess suggests healing her brother with some spirit magic. If a mage like Hugh zaps Aiden with magic, he'd bounce back in no time. But juicing him up like that too often would mess with his immune system. Even though this is exactly the kind of situation where spirit magic would be clutch, Aiden's gonna say no way. It's because he grew up watching his mom struggle with a long illness. Treatment freaks him out, but Sheena just wants to do something for him. And then Hugh chimes in again, reminding them he can't magically cure his highness, but he can pass along some medicine to help him get better. Hugh couldn't get in to see the prince himself because visits are off limits, but now he's found someone who can get around that order. Giving the princess the bottle, Hugh apologized for daring to ask her for such a favor. Later, Sheena went to her brother's room. He was already asleep, tucked under the covers. The room itself looked almost the same as hers, but the vibe felt different. You can feel the loneliness here, like it's taking shape from the air itself. Suddenly, Aiden woke up and started grumbling about his sister coming in without permission, and Sheena explained that she brought him special medicine to help him feel better. He kept complaining that he didn't need her medicine or her help, and demanded that she get out of his room immediately, hinting that she'd be in trouble for disobeying orders and coming in without permission. But Sheena just explained that since he's sick, everyone else is backed up too, and she's only offering to help so things don't fall apart. Suddenly, Aiden snatched the bottle right out of her hands. The princess even got scared he was gonna chuck it or smash it against the wall. But surprisingly, the prince twisted off the cap and started chugging the medicine straight from the bottle. After draining half of it, hoping his sister was happy, he told her again to get out of the room. Outside, Oscar was pacing like crazy with worry, and so was Hilton. And when the princess came out, he immediately started asking if the prince took the medicine. Plus, he was freaking out that he was done for because he let her in, disobeying orders. Sheena assured him that she was solely responsible and asked him to bring a basin with ice and a towel. Oscar realized the princess had decided to personally take care of his highness. She felt guilty about the assistant, but she couldn't leave Aiden alone. And she knew this situation wouldn't sit well with her brother, but she still decided to help. Because if there's no one around when things get tough and you're hurting, that's the worst feeling. But if they face the hard times together, she believes she can ease his loneliness. Meanwhile, the prince had fallen asleep again, but even in his sleep he felt the pain. He remembered being a kid. He had a fever once and complained to his mom about the pain. The best doctors were called in to figure out what was making him sick. And after examining him, the doctor announced the prince's fever was from overexertion. He needed 4 days of rest, but his mother was worried because he'd missed the banquet. It's gonna be his birthday, and she demanded he be healed using spirits. The healer explained that if they use that stuff too much, it'll only make the prince worse in the long run. Knowing he was right, the empress dismissed the healer. Aiden was just barely coming around and started mumbling again about how much he hurt. That's when Joni explained to her son that a noble man doesn't lean on others for help. And even more importantly, a ruler can't show his pain. Because pain is a weakness, and that's something you just can't afford. When that weakness shows, even the smallest things will be enough to take you down. So to become a true monarch, Aiden has to get rid of all his weaknesses. The boy wasn't about to argue with his mother, but he was still in a world of hurt. He grabbed her hand, begging her to just stay with him for a little while. But the empress snatched her hand back and asked him, does he feel any animosity towards his cold-hearted mother? Joan wanted her son to understand. She was sold off like cattle to a man who looks at her every day like she's some kind of bug, and now she can't stand anything she used to enjoy. The empress wants to run them through and make their corpses bow before her. That's why she wants the prince to avenge her, because she can't do it herself. And who knows what will happen to her if he keeps spouting such nonsense. The little prince admitted his mistake and vowed to be better. His own mother demanded he make sure their corpses were left for her to trample, but she also begged him, even if he had to crush her too, he had to stay on top. Because the throne can only ever belong to one person. Aiden followed his mother's words and pretended he was fine, despite his illness. He gritted his teeth and endured the pain hundreds of times, for as long as he could, and spending time alone, he got used to suffering, abandoning all hope. And now, as the fever struck him again, it felt like his mother had come to him once more. But when he cracked open his eyes, he saw a completely different face. His sister was leaning over him, smiling, wishing him good morning. Aiden wanted to chase her away again, but for some reason he didn't. Later, while he was taking a bath, Oscar knocked. He announced that the princess had gone back to her place, but promised to return after lunch. There was something else the aide wanted to say, but he was kind of hesitant. And under the prince's reproachful gaze, he confessed that the princess had something she wanted him to pass on. After his bath, he went to the table and saw rice porridge with an egg. Aiden had to eat all of it, and then take his medicine. Then it turned out that wasn't everything Her Highness had instructed him to say. The thing is, if Aiden doesn't eat 3 times a day and get a full night's sleep, she simply won't let him into her office and won't allow him to work. The prince was visibly annoyed by his sister's orders and the fact that she was calling the shots. But Oscar swore she was worried about him, wanting him to get better so work wouldn't stall, and knowing full well he could get his tongue cut out for saying that. The aide declared he'd tattle to the princess if His Highness didn't eat every last bite, and much to his surprise, the prince sat down and started shoveling down the gruel, explaining he'd rather eat than have the princess get on his case later. Oscar felt a huge weight lift off his shoulders, knowing His Highness wouldn't come down on him like a ton of bricks. Several days later, the day the delegation was supposed to arrive finally came. Sheena had taken good care of Aiden, and now he wasn't collapsing from exhaustion anymore. However, now he was even colder and ruder to her. But Sheena wasn't mad, because even though her caring might have bothered him, she didn't regret a thing. And she's ready to protect her brother from the queen by any means necessary, who's just arrived in the hall. Sheena will do whatever it takes to keep him safe from Rebecca Durine. This woman's first time in the Empire since Gione's wedding day, and she's asking the royal family how they've been all this time. Melissa was the first to greet her and introduce herself, hoping her guest had a pleasant journey. And Rebecca gratefully admitted that her trip was perfectly comfortable. Sheena couldn't figure out why Rebecca seemed so friendly, especially since Melissa took her sister's place. There wasn't a piercing vibe coming from the queen, she just seemed gentle, to the point where thinking about betraying Aiden felt impossible. Still, Sheena decided not to judge a book by its cover, because Rebecca could pull anything. After the greetings, the guest confessed she brought some small gifts, and right then, they hauled in huge chests stuffed with jewels and all kinds of riches. The emperor actually felt awkward, but Rebecca just asked him to accept them. Then she asked if she could cook something since she arrived for His Highness's birthday. He's her only blood relative, and she hasn't been able to take care of him until now. The princess listened to her every word, and so far there was nothing to suspect the queen of. But the fact remains, she came to nudge Aiden along with her own agenda. And now, this woman approached the prince and introduced herself properly. His Highness returned the greeting and told her to make herself at home. The queen was thrilled she could finally see her sister's son. Looks like she was happy to see how much he'd grown by then. But the next instant her face changed just for a second, and the princess sensed a dark and nasty vibe coming from her. It felt like the queen was sizing Aiden up like he was just a piece of meat. Sheena couldn't just stand by and watch, so she immediately went over to say hello. Putting on a smile, she introduced herself properly like a princess should. And Rebecca glanced her over too, noticing how much she looked like her brother. Those words sounded like a nice compliment, and they made Sheena happy. But then she caught herself realizing she was getting carried away, and she mentally told herself that she couldn't cross the line. The emperor came over and suggested the guest take a rest and head to the temple with the prince tomorrow. That offer worried Sheena, because it would leave Rebecca alone with Aiden. Later, they escorted the queen to the castle, and on the way, she praised everything the prince had achieved. She assured them it wasn't just empty praise because she always meant what she said. Sheena didn't understand her friendliness and doubted she'd act the same way tomorrow. The princess wanted to go with them, but the second empress's daughter can't appear at the first's grave. That ticked her off, and so did the way the distance between her brother and the queen was shrinking even now. Sheena jumped in between them again, asking what they were chatting about so sweetly. And right away, she noticed Aiden was practically giving her the death glare. Rebecca explained that she was praising the prince and that she regretted they hadn't met sooner. Besides, she's his only relative, but Sheena argued that he has a sister and a father. And the princess complimented his skills, the same ones all the professors praise him for. They say Aiden is like a precious gem, matching his birth month, a chrysolite. It's a stone that shines brightly in the dark, and in the past, the word referred to the emperor. The princess knew this from her royal studies. All the while, she wondered how to keep her brother from being isolated in the castle. While Sheena was talking, Aiden decided to shut her up. But then Rebecca jumped in, noticing that the two of them had developed a close bond. Sheena immediately confirmed it, saying they're family to each other. Soon they approached the castle, and the prince promised to send a servant before dinner. The servants then led the queen to a room that His Highness had been preparing himself for ages. Rebecca dismissed the maid, saying she'd call if she needed anything. And she was left alone with one subject who had urgent business for her. Without wasting words, the man pulled out an envelope with a seal. And handing it to the queen, he explained it was a letter from the Kingdom of Wind. It was delivered right before crossing the border, so it's obviously something important. The letter advised her to plant the seeds carefully, so she could reap the rewards one day. After reading it, she threw the paper at her accomplice and ordered him to burn it immediately. The people from Wind had been telling her this from the start, and she thought it was barbaric and ignorant. They offered her a deal, join them, and she'd get half the land where her nephew's blood would be spilled. Rebecca thought it was a damn disgrace to get letters like this as the ruler of a country. Even though she was shaking with indignation, the queen desperately wanted this land. She was ordered to make the prince kill his own father and plant the seeds of war. But the prince turned out better than she expected, so it's gonna be tough to manipulate him. And the emperor is openly showing his love and favoring the princess. If things stay as they are, the prince will be pushed out of the fight for the throne. So all the queen can do is goad Aiden into starting a rebellion. Not many countries want Wind to surpass them, and they'll back Snow if there's a war. But if the empire destroys itself, then we can confidently say that the land belongs to Rain. In that case, we shouldn't treat a good guy like a trained dog. Rebecca's convinced that telling the prince she's on his side will make him do anything for her. The servant wondered what she'd do with the little dog, suggesting they give it to Windu. But from the queen's silence, he figured out she's seeing the prince as her successor. Except she's already picked her own relative to take over. But the prince's skills are on another level. He's got what it takes to be a great ruler. Rebecca's sure that after all this, he'll fall right in line behind her. And her servant noticed that the princess is wary of the queen. But she wasn't worried, 'cause a kid can't know what even the emperor doesn't. Even though kids can be surprisingly perceptive, Rebecca's sure it's just childhood jitters. What bothers her more is how watchful the prince is. It's admirable, but it complicates things. We could brainstorm another plan, but the queen doesn't see the point. Because once the prince is in deep, he'll grab onto anything, even if it's a bloody mess. She just needs to break him down enough so he can't even think straight. And then her hand will be exactly what he needs to stay afloat. Meanwhile, Sheena noticed Aiden wasn't happy after she mentioned the chrysolite, and she didn't understand why he got so ticked off. As they walked on, Aiden turned around and asked what kind of garbage she was spouting, warning her to keep the useless chatter to herself in front of the queen from now on. And the princess promised him she'd be as quiet as a mouse. With that, the prince turned and walked away, and Sheena realized he wasn't actually mad. Still, she was ready to do whatever it took to protect him. That same evening, Sheena asked Alice and Joey to bring her all the makeup. The princess wanted to look more intimidating to stand up to the queen's maturity, and she told the maids to give her a really bold look for tonight's dinner. The maids were surprised, since Her Highness usually looks better with light makeup. Then Sheena threw a fit, demanding they do what she wanted. After that, Alice and Joey promised to do their absolute best. A little while later, Joey suggested she take a look in the mirror. The princess had a good feeling, but when she turned around, the mirror cracked. Alice immediately started wailing that it was a bad omen and that the mirror was scared of the princess. So they asked Sheena to wipe off her makeup, and she reluctantly agreed. The princess didn't get why a tough, hardcore look wasn't working for her, but she wasn't about to give up, so she decided to switch up her game plan, which she called, "It's impossible to hate a smiling face." But later, sitting at the table, the princess found it hard to keep smiling all the time. Because of the banquet prep, she'd been eating the same thing every day, and now she was sick of the smell of it. Her mother got worried, thinking it was from overwork, and suggested calling a doctor. But Sheena refused and forced herself to say the food was delicious. Melissa agreed, but asked her daughter to let her know if anything went wrong. Then the emperor continued his conversation with Rebecca about their side's envoy, so the queen suggested the prince should pay them a visit. I mean, it's his mother's homeland, he could learn a ton of cool stuff there. Rebecca wanted to show him his mom's favorite spots, but Sheena knew it was just another one of her schemes. Then the queen mentioned something about a golden reed forest. Hearing that, the princess immediately chimed in, saying she wanted to go too, claiming she saw how beautiful it was in a book and couldn't wait to see it for herself. Rebecca pointed out that only the prince was invited, and that's when Sheena started laying on the guilt trip. After that, the guest asked them to wait until the princess was older so she could come too, and that's when Her Highness remembered that the prince's coming-of-age ceremony was in 2 years, hinting that they could visit the kingdom together then. Rebecca couldn't argue with that, so she had to agree, and Sheena was stoked her little defense worked. If she ends the convo with a childish stunt like this, the queen can't do jack. Just then they served dessert, specially made for this reception. The queen herself ordered a tart lemon sorbet, hoping Aiden would dig it. Sheena noticed her brother scarfing it down like crazy, which even she didn't expect. So she figured she'd try some too, and that's when Rebecca remembered Gioni also loved sour stuff. Especially the prince's mom. She was all about lemon-flavored desserts. The queen's playing on Aiden's feelings for Gion, poking at old wounds so he'll lean on her. But the princess ain't scared of her trying to use the prince to stir up trouble. She's worried she might hurt him with some of the things she says. The next day, when they went to the empress's grave, Rebecca started by asking if her sister had ever talked about her. And when she got a no, she explained it was because they didn't exactly get along. But that wasn't the only reason. The head of their country wasn't heartless. Still, he decided to send the second princess and make a political marriage with Snow. To appease the empire, the nobles were practically begging him to sell off the princesses, and the weak king couldn't refuse selling his own daughter. Watching him, Rebecca learned an important lesson. That weakness equals imperfection, but with strength, you can avoid that. So I had to crush my own flesh and blood? My own sister? This time's no different. It's just part of the process of grabbing the throne and imperial power. Inside the crypt, the queen expressed a desire to hear something about Gion. She knew it was too late, but she's still part of the prince's family. And that was the moment Rebecca declared she was on Aiden's side. The rain that day was like the world weeping with bitter resentment. A few days later, Sheena met with Russell, who didn't agree with one of her requests. And she figured it was because she's a princess. So she announced that she was giving up her title. Rubies tried to explain that wasn't how things worked and begged her to reconsider. So Sheena wanted to check out what's beyond the castle walls and asked Russell to go with her. He's refusing, and she was even ready to go solo, but the guy put his foot down. He explained it's too risky to wander around alone outside the castle, especially for a girl. Sheena kept pushing, thinking it's just regular folks living out there. But Russell said their everyday life could be a real hazard for her. That's why he was asking her to rethink this whole leaving the grounds thing. But the princess was adamant, and it's not like she's itching to go someplace dangerous. Besides, it's not some crazy case of curiosity or a wild adventure she's after. It's just that Rubies wants to see and experience places other than the training grounds and gym. That's why she's asking him to be her partner for a simple walk around. Sheena wanted a new experience, one she was ready to share with him. That little speech of hers really helped convince the stubborn old mentor. I mean, he couldn't exactly say no to Her Highness, especially when she asked so nicely. Plus, she reached out and took his hand, which was a definite bonus. With that settled, the princess suggested meeting back here later and went to change. Before long, Sheena was stoked when she saw how Rubies looked. He'd changed too, and now he looked way more like a regular dude. The princess ended up with some of Hilton's old clothes from when he was younger. The knight was worried they were too big and offered to get something else, but Sheena said no way. Besides, while he was gone, she and Russell would be long gone. Hilton totally freaked, saying they shouldn't go alone, and of course, he invited himself along. Just to be safe, he double-checked if the princess had remembered the artifacts, and when she confirmed it, the knight asked her to activate them while he went to get the carriage ready. Sheena grabbed the artifact that changes the hair and eye color of whoever uses it. She put on the bracelet, and her hair instantly turned silver. Artifacts like these are essential for the imperial family to travel incognito. The princess offered a bracelet to Russell, so he could use the disguise too. She always thinks his eye color is really beautiful, of course, but this is necessary for a more comfortable time outside. The guy hesitated, wondering if he was even allowed to wear imperial stuff. He even admitted he didn't want to change his eye color, 'cause the princess digs him. Pretty sappy confession, and Sheena wanted to talk him out of it. But she went along with what he wanted and threw her cloak over him. She told him to be careful so the disguise wouldn't fall off. And to sweeten the deal, she said she wanted to be the only one seeing how good-looking he was during their walk. Soon as they hit the city, the princess was like a kid, wanting to hit up every spot. To make things easier, she took on the name Aya for the time being, so Russell could call out to her. Sheena kept holding Rubus's hand the whole time, until he finally said she could let go, but she was worried she'd get lost if they weren't holding hands, even though Sir Hilton was right behind them, keeping a hawk eye on Her Highness. It's just that the princess wanted to make some good memories with Rubies. And after that, he didn't ask her to go separately anymore, especially since he himself enjoyed feeling the warmth of her hand. and Sheena noticed him being so sweet again that her heart almost couldn't take it. Next, they decided to grab a bite, and on the way they saw a man carrying a beam. Someone called out to him at that moment, and he naturally turned around, but along with him, the beam also swung through the air, right in front of the princess's face. Another man managed to pull them away at that moment, shoving them to the ground, but he didn't even apologize. He just told them to watch where they were going. Like it was their fault this whole thing even happened. The princess wasn't really focused on his complaints, though. She was fixated on his yellow eyes like a predator's. Noticing the princess had frozen up, Rubies asked if she was okay. Only then did Sheena realize she was in his arms, and she jumped back like she'd been burned. She did it so fast, she lost her balance and started to fall backward. The yellow-eyed blonde broke her fall, catching her hand just in time. He scolded her again for being so reckless. But then Hilton pressed a dagger to his throat and ordered him to let her go. He obediently released her, and the princess went back to her mentor. The yellow-eyed guy grumbled that he was being treated unfairly after his good deed. He also pointed out that none of this would have happened if the ladies had been properly escorted. Hilton let him go, and the savior decided to leave, wanting nothing to do with them. The truth was, this was Prince Cassiel, venturing into the very heart of enemy territory. He was accompanied by a subordinate who advised him against taking such a huge risk. But the prince didn't listen, just hurried him along because they had business to take care of. He was planning to meet with someone he considered to be a real piece of work. Meanwhile, Rubis was apologizing for allowing the stranger's rudeness towards the princess. But Sheena wasn't angry at all because even though the guy was a jerk, he still helped them out. She also told Hilton not to blame himself for the oversight since she was the one who rushed off like a maniac. But the knight wouldn't back down and advised her to have more guards assigned to her next time. The princess snuck out to get Aiden a gift that was way better than the queen's, and she wasn't coming back until she found the perfect thing. To keep the knights from freaking out, she promised to stay close by. She even held out her hands so they wouldn't lose sight of her. The guys were a little confused, so she just grabbed their hands herself, squeezing tight, which made her super happy, knowing they wouldn't worry so much. Then she bolted towards her goal, dragging the guards along with her. Every vendor on the street was trying to get her to check out their stuff. At one stall, she saw these really cool, colorful hair clips. They were all sparkly and shiny, but Sheena didn't think that was the right kind of gift for her brother. She could practically see Aiden vaporizing her with a look if she gave him that gift. The shopkeeper noticed the guy next to her looked similar and figured he was her brother, so he offered to help the confused sister with her selection. Rubis was surprised. They thought he was Sheena's brother, but the shop guy was convinced. Just like he was sure the redhead next to them was their dad or uncle. The princess decided not to ruin the image and confirmed they were siblings. And when the shopkeeper gave his outfit a weird look, she explained he was allergic to the sun. Out of nowhere, Russell blurts out to Sheena that he's turning 15 this year, and she took that as an invitation to actually start calling him brother. The dude immediately got flustered, cause that's not what he meant, but his embarrassment just cracked the princess up. Right then, the vendor held out her wish bracelet, looked like just a regular string. You gotta wear it until it breaks. That's how your wish comes true. Looked like a sales gimmick, but Sheena got curious if Rubis even had a wish. The guy got all shy, but she reminded him he promised. And she warned him, if he said that again, she'd show up to practice with a hair clip. She could practically picture how ridiculous that would look. Then she went ahead and got the bracelet anyway, cause it was on sale. She decided to give it to Russell, even though he doesn't really want anything right now. But she's sure he'll want something someday, and then he can make a wish. And as she put the simple thing on his wrist, she said she hoped his wish would come true. The princess was getting hot on their walk and suggested they take a breather. Then she remembered Lady Lauren saying there was a bomb dessert shop nearby. They walked a little further and spotted a store crammed with goodies. Inside, the waitresses were decked out in pink, like fairy tale characters. And they greeted the guests like royalty, probably because of the hair clips. But what really freaked out Sheena was the overwhelming pink vibe. Hilton was also feeling awkward being called princess and all that, but the girls kept at it, showering them with compliments. The knight even took off the clip, but he was still reeling from the shock. In the shop, Sheena spotted a table where she and Russell could chill. Hilton wasn't having it though. He thought he should stick around and protect her. Sheena told him to chill out since they wouldn't be far apart. Then she asked him to order for everyone, calling herself princess. So there he was, scowling while Sheena was all chatty with Rubies. Before long, a ton of different desserts showed up at the princess's table. She told Russell not to be shy and dig in, or she'd have to spoon-feed him herself. Once he swallowed his first bite, Sheena decided to try these amazing goodies for herself. As soon as the sweetness hit her tongue, she felt like she was in paradise. Even with the lemon flavor, they were sweet, and Sheena thought Aiden would really go for them. But then she realized a whole cake was out of the question, since she still hadn't picked out a gift yet. She was so lost in thought, Russell started getting worried about her. But he didn't push her to open up if she wasn't comfortable. He just hoped she wasn't going through it, that nothing was weighing her down too much. Just then, the princess felt a rush of heat, and her heart started pounding. And to try and take her mind off things, she admitted she was racking her brain over a gift, because that's exactly why she'd organized this whole trip into town today, to pick out a birthday present for Aiden. The princess thought she could handle it, but now she's clueless. So she asked what Ruby's likes, figuring knights have similar tastes to her brother. She even guessed it might be armor or a sword with all the gear. Russell thought for a sec, then suggested getting him something that wasn't like a thing. Personally, anything the princess gives him always makes his day. Sheena was a little lost, not quite getting what he meant, but every word he said made her happy, and his honesty gave her courage. So, taking a deep breath, the princess confessed that thanks to Russell, she now had an idea for Aiden's gift. After a little while, Sheena managed to get what she needed, and she was grateful to her escorts. It was getting late, time to head back so Alice and Joey wouldn't worry. The princess enjoyed the outing, but her feet were screaming otherwise. Sheena felt even worse for Ruby's, who had to wear a hood all day. Still, she was super grateful he helped her pick out the gift. The most important thing is wishing the person getting the gift happiness. Sheena thought that giving a better gift than the queen would scare her away from her brother. But her goal is a bright future for Aiden and for all of them. And if she can just get through to her brother that she wants him to be happy, that'll be enough. That's why she was really thankful for Rubus's advice. She understood it because he accepted her gift with all his heart. But Russell was also really grateful to the princess for inviting him along. While they were all lovey-dovey, some old crone in a cloak spotted them. When she saw the princess, she started shaking all over, smacking her toothless gums. And she immediately rushed towards them, saying she'd finally been waiting for their arrival. She was already reaching for the princess, but Rubus stopped her just in time, preventing any harm. The old woman just hissed in a raspy old voice, begging for help while still reaching out. For some reason, she kept calling the princess their savior, and she kept trying to reach her highness, but Russell kept her at a distance. Sheena was in shock, not understanding what the old woman's words meant. Eventually, Ruby suggested they press her to explain everything. But the princess decided to leave her be, seeing how sick and scared she was. And then the woman, all wrinkled with age, spoke to the knight in a much harsher tone. When she noticed his eyes, she called him a pathetic bug. She even recited his destiny, saying his wings would be torn off. Then she begged for mercy, reminding him it would be seen as a noble act. She called the princess a saint, which shocked her even more. The girl remembered that Nishina was a saint, and Ruby's met his end like a bug. And now she heard the words she'd read in the original novel. This made it clear the old woman knew something, and she asked Rubus to wait. Then she turned to the old woman, demanding she confess who she really was. But bearing her gums, she just kept repeating that this guy was destined to die. She even described how, with his wings ripped off and fallen to the ground, he'd be buried in the snow, and his awful demise would be forgotten without a trace. Those words lit a fire under the princess, and now the old hag can kiss salvation goodbye. But she kept begging Sheena to ditch the kid and take care of a dying woman. Sheena shut her down hard, and the old woman's face twisted up in confusion. The princess wasn't about to help someone talking trash about her man. So, grabbing Rubus's hand, she said they should ditch this crazy lady. He shoved the clingy woman away and checked to make sure his lady was okay. The old woman was left standing there, totally baffled, wondering why she acted like that. She hated seeing those two walking away, all lovey-dovey, holding hands. And with a crazed look on her face, she charged after them, trying to grab the princess. Russell spotted the danger and yanked Sheena out of the way just in time. Just then, another guy showed up, like he materialized out of thin air. It was Prince Cassiel, and he grabbed the crazy lady to deal with her later. The princess was totally shocked again by this new savior popping up. He didn't waste any time chatting, just slammed the old hag's head into the dirt to keep her still. Sheena thought treating an old lady like that was way too rough. So she asked the blonde guy to let her go, saying they didn't need to go that far. But the prince just kept saying the problem wasn't just the escort, it was the owner too. He loosened his grip a bit and the old woman started cackling. Staring at the princess, she hissed in a creepy voice that there wouldn't be a happy ending. Cassiel told her to ignore that garbage, and Russell agreed, ready to get Sheena out of there. But even the princess agreed it looked more like the antics of a total nutjob. She left, but heard the old hag muttering that the saint was chasing pipe dreams, and that even in fairy tales, the witch always gets what's coming to her in the end. The prince was sick of her crazy talk, and his aide ran her through, shutting her up for good. Then he turned to the prince, asking if he could take care of the kids too. There was no need for that, and Cassiel ordered them to head back since they were done here, though he himself thought that girl was pretty damn weird. I mean, considering what she was wearing, she sure apologizes easily. And for some reason, she's worried about the lowlife who might have hurt her. The prince figured this lady either loves everyone or just doesn't know how messed up the world really is. Russell and Sheena headed for the carriages, where Hilton was supposed to have hired one already. But Sheena kept thinking about the old woman's words and didn't dismiss them as crazy ramblings. The princess's pensive mood made Rubus anxious again, so she explained that she was just shaken up by what happened. She told him to ignore it, assuring him that she was fine now. But now Russell seemed kind of wary, and that worried Sheena. And then, out of nowhere, the guy started cursing, loudly blasting that old woman. The princess was totally shocked. She never expected that from her mentor. He explained that it was a superstition. If you curse after something like that happens, it'll pay off. But Sheena thought it would be much better to use, nicer words. She never figured Russell even knew how to swear. Then she thought maybe he was just saying that to cheer her up. And that's when she had this brilliant idea, or so she thought. The princess just straight up told him his comment was total BS. Then she unleashed a torrent of cuss words that made the guy's ears curl up. Still, he had to give her props for the impressive vocabulary. But Hilton, who'd snuck up and heard the whole thing, was completely floored, and he had to ask where she'd even learned language like that. Soon enough, it was banquet day, when high society comes out to shine. But really, it's just a different kind of war, where everyone's got their own fight. When someone's got a weapon pointed at you, you gotta defend yourself. Knowing how to protect yourself is super important, especially when you're in a freaking war zone. Today was supposed to be the day these two countries finally buried the hatchet, and a chance to celebrate the prince's birthday together. Meanwhile, Hilton kept nagging the princess about minding her manners. The emperor told everyone to cut loose and have a good time today. Then he called the prince over, asking him to come closer. After that, he pulled out a gift and wished his son a happy 16th. As a present, His Majesty had prepared the legendary sword, Gloria. The room went wild. That's how the emperor shows he recognizes the prince's strength. This sword was given to the commander-in-chief during wartime. It symbolizes power. But it also shows that war is coming, and with this sword, Aiden just slammed the door shut on history. The princess decided to push the gloom aside for now. There's still time. They announced the banquet was open, but Sheena noticed her brother standing alone. She wanted to give him his gift, but Rebecca already swooped in. She cut the line and handed His Highness a small present, asking him to accept a handmade fountain pen as a token of goodwill. Aiden politely thanked her for the gift, promising to use it. Rebecca started talking about his mother again, understanding the emptiness he must be feeling. She has to go back tomorrow, but she promised she'll always be there for him in spirit. She just wanted him to understand her need to fill that void with stuff, you know? So the queen started straight up fishing for a husband, right there in public. Seeing what Rebecca was up to, Sheena immediately went to her brother and told him not to sweat it. Throwing her arm around him, she said he wouldn't be lonely here, because he's got his little sis right here, and he's definitely not going to be bored with her around. The queen didn't react, just commented that the princess was very fond of her brother. Sheena proudly agreed, even happier as she declared that they were family, and Rebecca decided to take her leave, wishing the prince a pleasant time. The princess thought it was weird she left so early but figured it was for the best. But now she was about to catch some serious heat from Aiden. He looked at her like he wanted to bury her alive, but all he did was tell her to let him go. And Sheena was scared she'd blown her chance to even talk to him. Just as she was trying to say something, his assistant called him over, saying he needed him for a few minutes. Aiden went to him, and all Sheena could do was hope he'd cool off a little in the meantime. Since she had a few free minutes, she decided to take a little break herself. As she headed to the lounge, she kept kicking herself for messing up the opportunity, but she believed she'd get another shot, and she'd give him the gift no matter what. Entering the room, the princess found someone had already taken the spot. But when she looked up, she was shocked to see the queen sprawled out on the couch. Sheena just apologized quietly and started to leave, but the queen stopped her, explaining that she was just about to have a little one-on-one with her. Right then, the girl got this weird, uneasy feeling. But she sat down, and the queen started in again about her relationship with the prince. Rebecca just thinks this kind of love is making Aiden uncomfortable. And Sheena laughed and said it's because she's always all over him, constantly bugging him. She knows she shouldn't, but she just wants to spend more time with him. Seeing Sheena cling to her brother, though, Rebecca remembered her own sister. Jion used to follow her around everywhere, too, back in the day. That went on until let's just say she arranged for her to relocate to this country. Noticing the princess's strange look, the queen was quick to say she didn't mean to freak her out. He's just saying that siblings vying for the throne, that's where the real drama is. Family's overrated, man. They're basically just rivals with a shared last name. It's like a family, with a ticking clock. That's why Rebecca sees herself as the only real family the prince has, because she doesn't have to claw her way to the top against him. As much as it sucked to admit, Sheena couldn't deny it. That's just how things have always been. But she didn't think the queen had any right to talk about what a real family was, especially since she was planning to stab Aiden in the back. Sheena snapped back, saying she doesn't see her brother as some temporary thing, but if that were to happen, it'd be way, way down the line, like when she's ancient. The princess was totally over this conversation and decided to bail. She wished the queen a sarcastic "have a great time" and peace it out. Once she was alone, Rebecca chuckled to herself, totally confident in her plan. Blythe Albans also showed up to the party, and he's a major player in high society. He's always been someone people envied for his lifestyle, which everyone raved about, and he had a serious beef with the prince, who trashed his reputation once. After that, rumors spread that he'd bolted like a wild animal hit with an arrow. The humiliation Blythe suffered that day was intense, but he still showed up to the party with his son, Rudius. They wanted to congratulate His Highness, but he flat out refused as soon as they approached, saying he didn't need the hands of some young, clumsy kid. Blitz stormed into the next room, furious at the prince's audacity, and punched the wall in anger. Turns out he wasn't strong enough, and he just ended up hurting his hand. Then he started taking it out on his son, saying he was the idiot who screwed things up and got them rejected. The poor kid was crushed, and the Earl just told him to get lost. Left alone, he kept cursing his bad luck, convinced fate had dealt him a dirty hand. Blit thought the queen was his ticket to climbing the social ladder. Just then, he spotted the princess walking down the hall looking totally dejected. He didn't want to run into her, so he immediately ducked around the corner. The Earl managed to hide behind a pillar so Her Highness wouldn't see him. But now he was curious about what was up with her and why she looked so bummed out. Blythe walked into the room Sheena had just left, and who does he see but the queen? Thinking he'd caught a break, he greeted her with a little flattery. But then Rebecca remembered that Count Albans used to be a supporter of Gione. He humbly assured her that he was just showing his respects back then. The queen started laying out her new scheme, praising him for his loyalty to the Empress, claiming she herself couldn't do the same because she really disliked her sister. And now her only nephew feels weird if you try to get too close to him, you know? That's when the Count asked what was up with the princess, who'd just stormed out looking serious. And the queen confessed she'd told her not to chase after the prince so hard, but it seems she's not listening. And because she's so young, she wants all of her brother's love for herself. The Count straight up admitted those two weren't exactly buddies. He figured the princess wanted to keep the queen away from the prince. Rebecca thanked him for saying that, realizing he was a total Aiden supporter, and asked him to watch over His Highness while she was gone. Getting such a crucial order, Albans swore he'd do everything he could. Meanwhile, Sheena was so ticked off she decided to lift her spirits with some booze. Talking to the queen stressed her out, and she just couldn't shake it off. And just as she downed another glass of champagne, Lady Lauren walked up. She was seriously shocked at Her Highness's behavior. Still, Halsey greeted her properly, and Sheena invited her to have a drink. Just seeing this lady always made the princess feel instantly better. Lady Lauren was worried she was pulling the princess away from something important, but she immediately protested, showering her guest with compliments, hoping to chat longer. While they were talking, Sheena noticed Halsey had come alone, without the other ladies, but they were all standing off to the side, having also noticed the princess was busy, waiting for their chance. So she decided to talk to them too, so they wouldn't get the wrong idea. A few of the ladies politely greeted Her Highness and started a conversation. They were curious about what she'd gotten the prince, and she said it was some scented candles. But she hadn't given them to him yet, worried he already had so many amazing gifts. Halsey told her not to wait, since the princess put her heart into it and should give him the present. The other ladies jumped on the bandwagon, saying the prince would totally dig a gift like that. They were mostly sweating it for themselves, because they'd never given gifts to guys before and were scared of screwing it up. Knowing her brother, Sheena kinda stretched the truth, saying he'd love anything he got, even if he didn't show it. Still, you could tell just by looking at him that he wasn't exactly thrilled with the queen's gift. And if he wasn't into gifts like that, the girls worried he'd laugh their gifts right out of the room. One lady heard the queen was related to him, but they didn't seem all that close. But the princess couldn't admit that she was the one who'd been cock-blocking their bonding time, so she just said they hadn't spent much time together yet. That's when the count butted in, spilling Sheena's secret about how she'd been keeping the family apart. He popped up out of nowhere like a bad rash, all smug about the dirty trick he'd pulled. He also spilled the beans about her disrespect towards the queen, saying Her Majesty shouldn't worry about the prince. Now, he's flipping out that the princess even dared to say that crap. Then, acting like he's all that, he demanded Sheena explain herself right then and there. The princess looked at him like he was a total moron, but now he's messing with her rep. But no matter how much he backs Aiden, he can't just insult a member of the royal family, especially since she never said the queen couldn't see the prince. Just then, Hilton showed up to sort things out, but Sheena told him to stay out of it. And walking up to the count, she asked what kind of explanation he expected if he was already so sure she was guilty. Glancing at the thrones, she noticed her parents were conveniently missing. In a situation like this, there's always going to be guys who buy what the count's selling, and he just kept raging, demanding the princess confess to whatever she did. All she did was fire back, saying he was disrespecting her, no matter what the truth was, and she called him out for using his position to cover up his own dirty deeds. Looks like even that didn't shut Albans up. He just kept yelling at the princess for the whole room to hear. Sadly, Sheena couldn't prove that everything she did was to protect Aiden, and she was worried she might be in trouble now, thanks to the count's supporters. Suddenly, a commotion broke out in the crowd, and the princess turned around. Just like the count, who, seeing the prince, immediately started sucking up to him. Aiden just walked closer and asked what all the yelling was about. And he asked the princess to explain everything, giving her this killer stare, like she was personally responsible for every messed up thing in the world. The whole room went silent, everyone glued their eyes on them. Sheena didn't rush to answer. She didn't even know how to explain this mess. Then His Highness called over his aide, who was, as always, nearby. The guy stepped closer to the prince and whispered something in his ear. And Aiden just blew up, yelling that this was way out of line, scaring his sister half to death. Right then, the Earl started eagerly agreeing, figuring the princess was about to take the fall. But Aiden was actually talking to Blythe, who froze, totally confused. He started making excuses, saying he did it all for His Highness, and that guy reminded him how to shut a yapping dog up. The count was so freaked he lost his voice, and besides, he had nothing left to say. Spotting the queen in the crowd, he hoped she'd protect him and vouch for him. But she just turned away, and Blythe realized they could rip his tongue out right then and there. Still, the prince warned him he didn't want to hear any more of his garbage. And the crowd started whispering that the count had embarrassed himself again, this time by raising his voice at the princess. Alban, red with shame and outrage, stormed off, and it seemed to Sheena that her brother had finally taken her side, which is what she'd been aiming for. Plus, it was the perfect moment to congratulate him, so she made up her mind. But just as Sheena opened her mouth, Aiden turned toward her. He just calmly asked everyone to keep things down. After that, His Highness headed off in the other direction. The princess was bummed, 'cause she wanted to give him a gift. Now she was wondering if her brother was really being honest with her, or if he just didn't want to make a scene. Right now, the princess couldn't figure him out at all, and that inner turmoil was just eating her up even more. The next day, like they planned, the queen was getting ready to leave. Before she left, she thanked the royal family for their hospitality. As a final word, she told His Highness to, keep trying his luck. And she said sweetly that she was really looking forward to seeing him again. Sheena watched from the sidelines, silently hating this wicked witch. Suddenly, Rebecca walked up to her, saying she'd had a wonderful rest here thanks to her. The girl just said a sweet goodbye, even though she wanted to be rude, but that could ruin her rescue plan. Just then, she noticed that Rebecca wasn't in a hurry to let go of her hand. And even more surprising for the princess was when the queen suddenly pulled her into a hug, who whispered in her ear that everything should happen just as Sheena said. In that moment, Her Highness became even more worried about her brother, and gently pushing the queen away, she asked her again not to worry, repeating after her that it would be that way, but her face betrayed her unease. Finally, Rebecca confidently declared that they would see each other again very soon. After that, she headed to her carriage. Meanwhile, Sheena was torn up inside, wondering if Aiden would ever be okay again. Later, even before training, she decided to take a peek in the garden and enjoy the roses. A maid led her there, wishing her a pleasant stroll, and Sheena promised to be back soon. Stepping into the garden, it was like entering another world. That's the impression she got from the sea of red roses. Besides, the color red always lifts the princess's spirits. It's like the strawberry on the cake, or the blush on her mother's cheeks like a young girl. And of course, her favorite Amelia flower, which Ruby's eyes resemble. At the same time, she was haunted by another red color, a bloody one, filling her with dread. Sheena felt like she was running to her parents' office again, knowing something terrible had happened. My parents were messed up bad, but they weren't dead yet. With his last breath, the emperor saw his daughter and told her to get the hell out of there. Then, in a flash, her nightgown was soaked with a wave of her own mom and dad's blood. The gruesome sight of her parents getting chopped to pieces would make anyone's skin crawl. Sheena, totally broken, fell to her knees, and that's when Vidin showed up. Without a word, he just raised his sword, ready to take her life too. And the girl was already ready to say goodbye to everything. But the scene shifted, and her brother was just kneeling in front of her, no weapon in sight. Tears of hope welled up in the princess's eyes, thinking maybe it wasn't over after all. But the prince leaned in close and whispered something she couldn't quite make out. Then he started to get up, but Sheena begged him not to leave and to hear her out. She reached out to him, but Aiden just kept getting further and further away. That's when Sheena's eyes snapped open, waking up from a nightmare, drenched in sweat. Sitting up in bed, catching her breath, she tried to figure it out. Why she's been having the same damn nightmare lately. It's been a while since that delegation, but there's still no progress. And she worried that her hellish dream might actually come true. Now Nishina's gonna pay the ultimate price, but she still hoped her brother would be happy. It seemed unfair that one person's happiness always came at the cost of another's misery, and she didn't understand why fate was forcing her and her brother to make each other suffer. Another day, another attempt at breakfast, but I just couldn't swallow a bite. My parents noticed I wasn't exactly at my best, and the emperor was the first to speak up, offering me anything I wanted. He apologized for being tied up back then and not being able to give me my reward. For doing such a great job preparing for the banquet celebrating the delegation's arrival, I didn't get why now, months later, especially since the ball was a total disaster. And then Count Albans got reamed out by the emperor for his behavior. So, I didn't really think I deserved any praise. I asked my parents to give the reward meant for me to Aiden instead, explaining that he did most of the work, so he's the one who deserves the credit. Remembering that Dad made a deal with Round just the other day, thanks to him, and on top of his duties, the prince still finds time for fencing. He even carries around a commander's manual, and he's obviously gonna crush it in the war. After that, Sheena started begging for Aiden to be made the successor, but Deegan suddenly slammed the table. The emperor figured the prince must have said something to the princess, maybe even scared her somehow. Sheena was so startled she almost choked, but this kind of thing had happened before. Back when they were kids, she once turned down the succession and Dad punished Aiden for it. After that, Sheena never brought up that topic again, afraid her brother would suffer again. Still, she couldn't back down anymore, and she stood up abruptly from the table, declaring that it was only her decision, and she only thought her brother was worthy of the position. That's when she started whining again about not wanting to be the heir. But the emperor blew up, saying that spot was hers and hers alone, and she better not ever bring it up again. The princess got all bummed out and stormed away from the table without a word. Dagan wanted to go after her, but figured she needed some time to herself right now. Sheena bolted outside where the clouds were getting thick, and she had no clue what to do next. She realized that a happy ending for everyone was just some pipe dream she had, and there was gonna come a time when she'd have to make a choice. That's when she remembered what the queen said about a temporary family. Those thoughts didn't just make the princess feel icky, they made her want to hurl. She stopped by a tree to settle her stomach a little, but inside, the pain from everything that was happening just kept getting worse. Now the girl just wanted to die herself, as long as no one else got hurt. Suddenly, Rubus's voice came from behind, and the princess actually flinched. The guy was just curious why she'd come to the training grounds so early, since practice wasn't for a while. Scraping her fingers against the tree trunk, Sheena decided to ask him something, and she asked him to answer honestly, no matter what she asked him. She wanted to know if he'd follow the ruler's orders, no matter what they were. Rubus, suspecting nothing, declared that he would definitely obey. And then the princess wondered if he would carry out the assignment. What if he's ordered to run her through with his sword? The question hung in the air like a death sentence, and Russell froze, completely stunned. Now he understood the impossible choice. He didn't want to hurt Sheena, but he saw a loophole, because knights are sworn to protect the royal family. But the princess pressed him, demanding to know if he'd obey a direct order from the ruler. All he could say was that he wanted to stay by her side as long as she'd let him. That's when Sheena confessed she didn't want to be empress. She couldn't even grant the knights the title of imperial sword, the one they all crave. So she probably won't be able to keep any knights around for long, because she doesn't want to become the kind of ruler who makes everyone miserable. So Russell was down to just be her servant, anything to be near her. He'd even try being a stable boy, seeing as fencing's the only thing he's good at. The princess cut him off, reminding him that without power, she can't just hand out titles. Rubus already knew that, but he still stuck to his request. He knew it was a long shot, but he just wanted the princess to give him a chance. Because he wants to help Her Highness in every way, always. And whether Sheena becomes empress or not, he's ready to stick by her side till the end. At that moment, the princess's face changed because there was something she could do. And proof that the future's changed is standing right in front of her. And Rubies, like always, started apologizing for being so demanding of her. To his surprise, the princess just threw herself at him, hugging him so tight she almost knocked him over. And she confessed that she was really happy he'd chosen her. But Rubies realized she was giving him a shot to be Her Highness's champion. Leaning back a little, Sheena explained that he wasn't just a tool to her, but a friend. Looking him straight in the eye, she assured him that he was her guy. And she'd be happy if he just stuck around. The guy was more than happy to take that role, which made the princess super happy. A few days later, Sheena prepared a ribbon as a gift for Vare and a new hat for Selleck. Originally, she'd baked cookies to eat with Rubies, but he wasn't around. And all the knights suddenly had business to attend to because things were heating up at the border. Most of them got pulled to beef up headquarters, and Russell's one of them. Sheena felt like it had been months, even though it was only a few days. On the way, she ran into Hugh, who was actually headed to meet her. Rummaging through his bag, he confessed that something was finally wrapped up. At first, the princess didn't catch his drift, but then it clicked. The mage whipped up some medicine for her, the kind that really boosts your energy. It didn't exactly look appetizing, and Sheena wondered if it was even safe to drink. Hugh explained it had good stuff in it, but he could take it back if she wasn't feeling it. The princess snatched the bottle right up and started chugging. The taste wasn't great, that's for sure, but she already felt way better. And after downing every last drop, she said it was like drinking water. That's when Hugh asked if Her Highness could do the same. Sheena froze, scared that he'd figured out her abilities. Then the mage confessed that Nana had told him everything during the examination. But he reassured the princess, promising he hadn't told anyone. He even suggested a memory-wiping mage if she was worried about it. The girl wasn't going for that, since something could go wrong and the person could end up a vegetable. Either way, Hugh was ready to go that far for her peace of mind. He sounded sincere, especially since he swore on his heart. And Sheena agreed that there was no other choice but this option. After that, she took Hugh to the lake, where she introduced him to the spirits as her magic mentor. Ver and Selleck immediately appeared and greeted the new guest. Hugh was surprised. He thought the princess was going to wipe his memory, but Sheena didn't want to do that to the best water mage, preferring he teach her instead. The guy calmed down a bit and was actually happy with the princess's choice. And Sheena solemnly asked him to take care of her and teach her everything. The first lesson was an explanation that a spirit always stays near a mage. When a mage's abilities unlock, they start to see them. And Hugh asked him to consider if mages can see the spirit of a mage who hasn't developed yet. Sheena figured that if that were the case, Hugh would have immediately seen a spirit next to her. Nailed it. The answer was spot on, and she got props from the mentor. Spirits exist in a higher dimension, one that's invisible to humans. For mortals to see them, you need a special, well, a go-between. Take Selleck, for example. He's already made his presence known in this dimension. While Hugh was giving Sheena lessons, two spirits were goofing off, and Selleck was mostly just messing with Vare. The princess figured out that Vare was using the lake as her connection to this world. She's a spirit bonded to her, and she's got a real knack for getting close to people. And it's pretty clear she's been keeping an eye on the princess this whole time. Ver immediately confessed that she'd been waiting and was super stoked when they finally met. And right then, Sheena felt bad about thinking of blowing her off. So she started begging Vare for forgiveness, promising to really try her best. Then Hugh suggested they get down to sealing the contract. The princess got worried, because then the other mages in the palace would be able to track her. Hugh explained that you'd need a high rank to do that, and he's the only one with it right now. So everything's gonna be fine, and Ver was actually stoked to finally make the deal. Sheena wondered if it was possible to do this with two spirits at once. But a deal with Selleck wouldn't make sense, since he could only offer the most basic help. Still, that was enough for the princess. She just wanted to be with her buddies. Hugh wasn't gonna argue and suggested they get started on the contract. To do it, you gotta give the spirit a name, spill some blood, and promise to be together for life. She already gave them Shin's names, so the contract's half done. All that was left was to drop some blood and make a promise, which the princess was totally down for. Looks like Vera was the happiest of all. She'd been waiting for this day like crazy. Her Highness went to the water's edge, and the spirits hung out in the air beside her. Then she bit her finger to get some of her blood. And after promising to stick with the spirits till the end, she dripped a few drops into the water. After that, the princess started listening closely, hoping everything worked out. And she knew it did when the mage mentor clapped his hands in approval. The princess was so stoked herself that she started dancing on the shore with the spirits. After letting Shin enjoy the moment for a bit, Hugh suggested they get down to practice. She didn't know what she'd have to do yet, but she was ready for anything. Then he showed her how to control the flow of water using energy from his fingers. Sheena really liked that, and she asked him to show her a few more tricks. And Ver showed her the true state of the water's power. After that, Hugh suggested they practice controlling the water together. But before that, the princess wanted to do something important. She solemnly thanked Hugh for becoming her mentor, and she extended her hand to seal it with a handshake. He smirked and suggested they reevaluate that statement after everything she'd said, specifically the part where she made him her mentor and therefore an ally. Even if none of this had happened, from the moment little Sheena reached out to him, he was always on her Highness's side. But now Sheena was a little miffed that he refused to shake her hand. And realizing what she wanted, Hugh happily took her hand. Sometime later, when winter came, Sheena and Rubies had a less than pleasant chat. The princess was upset about what Russell thought of her. A few hours earlier, there was a meeting about the defense of the Empire. The Emperor agrees that we need to make an effort to ensure our strong defenses don't crumble. Today, he gathered the guards to hear their opinions and wishes. Rubus's father, Lord Russell, decided to speak first. He straight up demanded troops and supplies for his estate. Dagon noticed in the documents that he'd requested the exact same thing last time, but he'd already used it all up because the raids were getting more frequent. Nasser Scope said, not buying it, that supplies couldn't possibly disappear that fast. Then it turned into a total circus with everyone arguing about who needed what more. The Emperor shut them down, wanting to hear about the situation on the ground and the successors. Someone asked for military backup, someone else wanted a medical facility. But Sir Russell kept his mouth shut this time, because he had nothing to say about the successor. Not long ago, he let Rubies take a warm bath at home for the first time, get dressed in clean clothes, and have a decent meal. This dude was straight up inhaling his food, barely even chewing. Russell was doing all this for his son, see, because they just ordered Rubies to ship out as a commander in the war. And Rubies was like, yo, I never even learned how to fence, but his dad just blew up, claiming he owed them for all the food and clothes they gave him. Dad always thought the kid was a total screw-up and never let him forget it. Thing is, Rubus had been training with the Knights for a year already, which just made the old man even madder because he didn't want his son embarrassing him. Turns out, he also found out his little boy's been helping Her Highness with her swordplay lately, so he demanded Rubis ask the princess to give them some kind of edge. That way Rubus could finally prove to his dad he's good for something. The kid didn't appreciate his old man running his mouth about Her Highness, and he refused to do what he was asked, which only pissed his dad off more. So, giving in to his rage, the old man went to smack some sense into his son to remind him of his place. Rubus, seeing he was about to get another beating, remembered something important, and in the next instant, he grabbed his father's hand, blocking the blow. Then he announced he was leaving if his old man had nothing else to say. Lord Russell, stunned, didn't immediately grasp what had happened or how his son dared to stop him. Clenching his fist tight, he got ready to really let him have it. But the kid had already turned and was walking away from his relative, not even looking back. In the past, Rubies would have just stood there quietly and taken whatever was thrown at him. But he'd recently promised the princess he wouldn't let anyone walk all over him. That's the day he finally met up with Sheena, though he was running a little late. The scrape on his cheek immediately caught her eye, but he swore he was fine, and that it wasn't some intern hazing him like last time. Rubis played it off as an accident, didn't want to look like a total screw-up. The princess still pressed him to come clean, knowing this kind of thing can happen to anyone. And that's when he straight up told her he didn't want to cause her any trouble with that cut. The guy basically called himself a useless nobody who couldn't even keep a promise. So he figured he had no right to be around her, which really bummed her out. Sheena was ticked that Rubis thought so little of her. Sounds like she's one of those people who only keeps you around if you're useful to her. Realizing he'd just put his foot in his mouth, Ruby started apologizing like crazy. He swore he never thought anything like that, and that he just worded it all wrong. And the princess explained that she didn't care about his value or any of that stuff. She assured him he could rely on her as much as he needed. Then she touched his cheek and, using magic, healed him right up. Russell felt the discomfort in his cheek vanish and even touched the spot with his fingers. When he realized the scrape was gone, he wondered how Her Highness had done that. Meanwhile, Sheena was trying to figure out who could have hurt him if it wasn't the cadets. Remembering what was discussed at the meeting today and who was there, she figured it out. Only Earl Russell, his own damn father, would pull a stunt like that on her friend, and she was dead set on making him pay before he skipped town. She snapped back to reality when Ruby started asking what was up, but even the princess seemed clueless about how she managed to pull that off. She played it cool though, like she wasn't about to spill the beans, since Ruby's wasn't always upfront with her either. Immediately backtracking, saying she was just kidding, she decided to introduce him to her buddies. Suddenly, there was the ever-cheerful Vare and, as usual, the slightly puffed-up Selleck right in front of Russell. While Russell was tripping out, thinking he was seeing ghosts, she introduced him as their fencing instructor. Then she explained to him that she'd healed his wound thanks to their magic, and after that, she asked her friend to keep the fact that she was a mage on the down low. Rubis was a little nervous that the princess was trusting him with such a secret, but Sheena didn't regret it, because he's someone she cares deeply about. After she said that, the guy started tripping over his words again, totally flustered, and once the shock wore off, he was actually stoked about what he meant to Sheena. He promised he'd always protect Her Highness, even if it meant giving his all. Meanwhile, Vare and Selleck were watching them like it was some rom-com, and Russell confessed to the princess that she was also really important to him too. A few days later, when Sheena met with Hugh again, she asked for more practice. But they'd already trained today, and that should be enough for now. The mage explained there was something else Her Highness needed to pay close attention to. Specifically, you can't use magic when you're completely drained. The power of spirits bleeds into reality through a conduit. But if a mage pushes themselves too hard, that mage conduit can get warped. And then the practitioner will merge with that spirit and just vanish from this world. So the princess needs to get plenty of rest, and I mean plenty. Sheena understood his instruction, but something else piqued her interest. She wanted to know how much she needed to train to be able to heal people. Hugh explained that she didn't have to focus on healing others. Just because she has the power doesn't mean she has to spend it on the sick. But Sheena thought such an ability was pointless if she wasn't helping people. So the mentor realized the princess was up to something and pressed her for details. She confessed she was planning a trip to Silas. She'd love to go to Grafton, but there's no way they'd let her near such a dangerous zone. Sheena wanted to see everything with her own eyes and help the people who were hurting. Silas is a good choice, especially since that's where she originally met her end. Hugh was just glad the princess hadn't picked a worse place to sneak off to, but he reminded her she still needed to get permission from the Emperor. Sheena agreed and had already rehearsed how she'd ask 1,000,000 times in her head. After her last stunt, neither mom nor dad even gave her a slap on the wrist. Just act like nothing happened, like there was no disagreement at all. But if Sheena brings up the Silas trip again, things are gonna get awkward, like, immediately. She worked up the nerve and went to her parents to ask permission to go. She figured her dad would start grumbling again, but surprisingly, he agreed right away. Said it was super important for the heir apparent to go on an expedition. However, the Emperor did have a few conditions. First off, the entire 2nd Imperial Knights squad would be going with her. Also, because of her upcoming birthday banquet, she couldn't stay there for more than a week. But the biggest thing, and this totally caught the princess off guard, was that Prince Aiden would be tagging along with her at all times. Sheena agreed for the sake of the trip, even though deep down, she really didn't want that. Getting to Silas was a real trek, man. And most of the time, both the prince and princess were just stone-cold silent. This heavy silence was getting to the girl, sometimes she could barely breathe. Then Aiden drops the bomb that he doesn't have time to babysit her the whole time like their dad ordered. Once we arrive, he's planning an inspection, and Sheena's stuck at the orphanage. The princess was about to protest, but just then the carriage screeches to a halt, which sends Sheena flying across the whole damn carriage. But her brother caught her, so she didn't bust herself up too early. The princess was actually surprised he gave a damn about her. She was gonna thank him, but he just chucked her back onto the seat. Then, looking out the window, Hilton explained that a kid had appeared in front of the carriage. Sheena popped her head out the window too to see what was going on. Up ahead, the knights were leading away a skinny kid in a thin shirt with hollow eyes. The princess got curious why he was wearing so little in the dead of winter. Aiden ordered them to move on, but Sheena said they couldn't just leave the kid like that. He'd die. But the prince couldn't have cared less. Besides, there wasn't really anything they could do for him, because then they'd have to take care of all the other poor folks in the village, and there are tons of them. So, the prince told his sister to ditch the sympathy since they couldn't help everyone. Sheena still didn't agree, saying they could at least protect what was right in front of them. But Aiden always preferred looking out for the people he couldn't see. Still, Shin was taught not to ignore suffering, to show compassion. Only the situation was so messed up right now, the prince couldn't see the point of mercy. And out of nowhere, the princess confessed to her brother she never even considered becoming empress. Aiden didn't get why she was bringing this up all of a sudden. And then she declared that he was the only one who could be a truly great ruler. She figures the right call is to, make a tough choice for the greater good. Still, she hopes her brother won't just brush off that sacrifice. Shin didn't know if her words got through to him, but she wanted him to become the Empire's guiding light. The Aiden she knew couldn't be happy if it meant profiting off someone else's misery, but in the far future he'll ditch all his feelings and become totally ruthless. And she really didn't want her brother turning into a cold-hearted dude. After a while, they finally arrived at the Silos orphanage, where the head honcho, North Irvy, was super stoked they'd come to such a backwater place. To throw him off the scent, the princess introduced herself as Aya Brandon from the Viscountcy. North heard she'd be traveling with someone else, and she explained her brother was on a different schedule. And first off, she asked to meet the kids and check out the setup. They immediately took her to a room that was, let's just say, not fancy. The walls were crumbling so bad you could walk right through the holes. But for their guest, they'd set aside the nicest room, which even had clean sheets. North blamed the destruction on a typhoon that hit them this summer. But the princess said everything was fine, which Hilton didn't buy for a second, seeing as there were hardly any walls left. Sheena elbowed him to keep his voice down and not be so blunt. Then, they were introduced to the kids. There were 5 of them. The princess greeted them cheerfully, promising they'd have a blast this week. The kids huddled together, and North explained they were just super shy. So, Sheena started getting to know them one by one, trying to make friends with each of them. And after warming up a bit, 2 of them started teasing the others, just like normal kids. The princess immediately stepped in, saying, teasing wasn't cool and you gotta respect your friends. And she asked everyone to support 2 of them who were already talking about getting hitched someday. Little Mary realized that their guest also had someone special in her life. Sheena immediately thought of Ruby's, who she was missing right now. Feeling a little shy, she admitted that there was someone like that for her. But then the kids started demanding she tell them her whole story, every detail. Meanwhile, Aiden was making his way through the snowy, dark forest, and someone unknown was creeping up quietly behind him. But a twig snapped underfoot, and when the prince turned, he saw a sword blade right in his face. Late that night, the princess barely felt alive. Even though she hadn't done any physical labor, watching the kids had completely drained her. She couldn't believe this was her limit after all that training with rubies. She was also a little worried that Aiden hadn't been back for 2 days. Just then, Hilton knocked and she immediately let him in. He came in looking troubled, admitting that the news wasn't great. They've stopped receiving updates from His Highness. According to his last message, he was supposed to infiltrate the top dogs involved in some shady deal. Apparently, the prince was accompanied by knights while gathering evidence, and Hilton assured the princess that they'd all be okay. Still, Sheena wasn't too worried because the knight squad is trustworthy. Besides, she knows that in the original story, nothing bad happened to Aiden during this time, so she decided to focus on what she could handle for now. During the day, she helped North and the kids handle the basic chores. They even had a blast throwing snowballs as a group. In between, Sheena was teaching them to love drawing, showing them how it's done. But the results of her drawing were judged by all sorts of animals, even a little monster. Actually, Sheena drew a rabbit, but it really didn't turn out quite right. Sean even honestly said that Loy draws way better. He can even draw dragons, and Sheena asked him to make a drawing for her, promising to hang it in her room and admire it before bed. The boy agreed, and the princess was as happy as if she were a little kid herself. And in the evenings, she read the kids different fairy tales in a hushed voice, waiting for the moment when all 5 of them were snoring away. Then Hilton showed up at the princess's place again, with news about the prince. A telegram came saying he'd wrapped things up safe and sound and would be back real soon. Sheena was stoked, 'cause there hadn't been any word before that. She was genuinely happy her brother was alive and kicking. Now they could head home, and she was almost bummed to say goodbye to the little guys. Later, everyone got together to go meet young Master Brandon. That's what Aiden was calling himself. The princess stayed with the kids and promised she'd keep an eye on things. Once everyone, including Hilton, had left, the princess could finally call for Vare. Sheena told her they'd be heading home, and all that was left was to say goodbye to the kids. Just then, a loud kid's scream ripped through the street. The princess could tell from the sound of it that something terrible had happened. Outside, this kid, Shin, had slipped off the scaffolding and was hanging on by a single hand. The other kids were freaking out, not knowing what to do or who to call for help. Shin was barely holding on, his arm shaking and slipping off the cold wood. And then he just couldn't grip anymore, and he let go, losing all hope. But in the next instant, Sheena grabbed him, managing to snatch his hand just in time. The kids looked even more terrified, since the girl herself was dangling halfway off the scaffolding. The princess believed she could pull him up, but she could feel herself slipping too. The weight of the slightly chubby kid was only confirming it. Sheena's strength was slowly fading. All she could do was pray help arrived soon. That's when Vare showed up, telling her to use magic and save the kid. You can use the snow, that way there's less chance of getting hurt. But just then, Sheena spotted Aiden's group approaching. So she can't use magic right now. She can't risk giving herself away. But then another problem hit. The board cracked under the weight. And the princess went plummeting down with that boy. Ver was freaking out. She didn't know what to do, terrified her mistress would get hurt. Sheena just gave the spirit a pitiful look and silently begged for her forgiveness. Aiden saw his sister falling from the upper floor and totally lost it. He rushed to help, hoping he could catch her, but he was still too far away. And Sheena, thinking she was about to die, just wished she could hear her brother call her name one more time. Just like when they were kids, back when they were actually friends. Their eyes met for a split second, and that split second felt like forever. Then there was a thud, and the prince was faced with a horrifying sight. The princess was lying in the snow, clutching the baby to her chest, a pool of blood spreading beneath her.